Good evening. Before I call our meeting to order, I would like to share some messages with the New Canaan community. The first one is, New Canaan, we are with you. The New Canaan Board of Education is the bridge between our community and our school system. We are living in one of the most challenging health crises in our modern history. I'm here tonight as a Board of Education member, but first and foremost, I am a mother to 3 children who also attend our public schools, and a resident of this community for 16 years. We are all fellow parents, and we are walking on this journey with you. We understand your frustrations and the emotions involved in this 3rd school year of COVID. We hear you. We share your goals for continued academic excellence and are also concerned for the emotional well-being and development of every child in our schools. Thank you for the emails, sharing your views and your personal stories. As our school doors open once again to parents over the next few weeks, I am hopeful and optimistic that this is the beginning of a new and final phase of this pandemic. The second thing that I'd like to share is our board supports local control. We continue to operate under Executive Order 13A, requiring masks in schools until February 15th. This and other orders are being considered for extension by the legislature next week. At this time in the pandemic, we support a shift to local control because New Canaan has exemplified the model for how local decision-making has benefited children through this pandemic and how administrators, board members, educators, and our town leaders can achieve success through dialogue, trust, thoughtful planning, and a universal commitment to our students. We continue to learn and lead on how to keep schools safe and open, and we will continue supporting decisions based on data, facts, and up-to-date state information while balancing urgency and desire for our students to experience the most out of these precious years in school. This approach served us well and has kept our schools open for 2 years without a single unexpected school closure since March of 2020. And even this month, in the face of record-setting teacher absences and substitute teacher shortages. Connecticut has long been a national leader in education, thanks in part to the foundational belief in the importance of local voice and control. To that end, we are writing a letter to the governor, state commissioners, and legislators in favor of local control to be finalized after the community forum with legislators this Thursday evening. And we encourage you all to take part and contact your local legislators to share your views. Finally, let's work together and lead forward with civility. Let's continue to set the standard for how we deal with difficult issues and continue to show our state and nation that who we are is a reflection of how we work through this difficult time. I have witnessed firsthand the power of this community. So tonight, I ask of you 2 things. The first, please be respectful and civil. Let's show our children how we care for each other and our community. Civility lifts people up, motivates them, and helps foster a culture that makes the world better for our kids. The second, let's continue to show appreciation and gratitude to our teachers and all those who work with our children every day. They have showed up faithfully for our kids since day 1 of this pandemic, and without them, we simply would not be where we are. They have been recognized as the #1 teachers in the state because they care about our kids first and have sustained our excellence in academic performance despite significant periods of disruptions. Our schools are warm, safe, and happy places to learn and work, and we cannot take this for granted. New Canaan, we are stronger together than we are divided. The best we can do for our children is to continue to work together. I hold faith that brighter and easier days are near. Thank you. With that, I would like to call to order the special meeting of the New Canaan Board of Education. The date is January 31st, 2022. We have open items before the board that I'd like to address before we approve the agenda. There's a motion on the table that was to add COVID protocols to the special meeting tonight, and I would like to ask Mr. Benefit if you'd like to withdraw that motion since we're here tonight discussing COVID protocols.
Sure.
Thank you.
We can withdraw that motion.
Thank you. And just also an announcement that we will be adding an additional special meeting to take place on Friday. That time will be shared as soon as possible. And on that agenda will be school start times and the letter to the governor. With that, is there a motion to approve the agenda for this evening? Brendan first, second, Erica. All in favor? Thank you. Okay, comments from the public. The Board of Ed expects mutual respect, civility, and orderly conduct among all individuals on school property, at school events, and in communication with district employees. The Board encourages positive communications and discourages volatile, hostile, or aggressive language or action. Board of Education meetings are meetings held in public, not public meetings, and the Board expects compliance with meeting rules and expectations. We seek your cooperation with this endeavor, and thank you in advance for understanding. To ensure the public's right to be heard, the Board has set aside time during this meeting for public comments. 2 minutes will be allotted to each speaker and a maximum of 15 minutes to each subject. 2 quick things to add to that. Just a reminder that this Thursday evening, February 3rd, our 4 local legislators are coming together to host a community forum. It will take place at 7 p.m. at Saks, and more information will be shared with the school communities tomorrow if you haven't already received that information. And judging by the large size of the group, I would ask just to consider, to yield, for those who have already spoken to the board, to perhaps yield time to those who haven't, and we'll move through this as quickly as we possibly can. So with that, if you could just raise your hand and maybe just queue up, a few at a time in the back, and you can approach the board at this podium right here in front of the stage. Who would like to begin? Okay. You can be second. Thanks. 1, 2. And please state your name before you begin.
Matthew Frank, my first Board of Education meeting. I'm in favor of local control. What does local control get us in terms of what decisions are you prepared to make?
Thank you. Next. If there's other people that are ready to speak, please go ahead and start to queue up. That would help.
Good evening, Paul Gerard. Brought the whole gang with me today. First, I wanted to say, just in regard to Dr. Lutzy and Ms. Ration, I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page here because there's a lot of mixed messaging going on, as well as inconsistencies. So I want to get this misinformation out of the way. Dr. Lutzy, as we clearly noted, you said in an email that we're at a point right now where we can cure many who are experiencing severe illnesses. Ms. Ration at the last meeting said, we're still only 2 years into this and still don't know quite a bit about COVID. Those were her exact words. We know quite a bit about this specific genome of this virus. Otherwise, you wouldn't have said, sir, we can cure many who are experiencing severe illness. So we really need to bridge that gap and find out why there's a miscommunication going, because it sounds like there's misinformation going on between the two of you, and we need our most senior member of the board to be on board with you so we can be on board with something, the people here in this community. Now, Dr. Lutzy, we talked about pushback, that we have to push back against what's happening via the governor. And as you noted, Ms. Parkhill, I appreciate you saying that there is a letter going on, but as it stands right now, we're far behind on our neighbor rival sports town, Darien. They got this done in the summer. They sent out a letter. They just sent out another letter saying, quote, we request that the greater autonomy and flexibility regarding mitigation strategies, including quarantining and mask wearing, be granted to school boards, district administration, and health professionals at the local and regional levels. They're making you guys look bad. They're on the ball. They got this done. I see a signature here from Superintendent of Darien Public Schools, Dr. Alan Adley, as well as the Chair, Darien Board of Ed, Mr. David Denny. They got this done. Why are we far behind? Well, that's right, because we had a previous Board of Ed Maybe that's why now they're the previous Board of Ed, because we desperately needed an infusion of integrity and fortitude, and we need to get this done. Now, I listened to, I can tell you this, too, as I noted last time. It should not take a former sergeant in the United States Marine Corps to have to come here and square you guys away. We got to get this done. Square this away, get it done. All right? I'm about business. I'm about action. Let's get this done as a community, right? We want bipartisanship. I'm all for that.
2 minutes is up. Thank you.
All right.
I would just like to remind everyone, we keep comments and background noise to minimum. Let's allow the speakers to speak and continue to move through the meeting. This is a Board of Ed meeting, and we have business to conduct. Next, thank you.
Good evening. My name is Josh Kay. My son's in kindergarten at E-School, and I have a 3-year-old who will be joining him there in a few years. First, thank you all for your service. This is a demanding, challenging job, and we're dealing with an emotional, difficult issue tonight, so thank you. I wanted to voice my strong support for the thoughtful measures that the administration, supported by the Board of Ed, have taken over the last 2 years throughout the pandemic, guided by educators and public health professionals. This pandemic has been hard on all of us, and the mitigation measures taken to date, including universal masking, have undoubtedly been challenging. But they've worked. They've kept our schools open. They've kept our kids safe at a time when a lot of other communities haven't been able to do that. So going forward, I hope, as Ms. Parkhill said, we are now entering the final phase of this pandemic. I'd urge you to be careful and thoughtful and deliberative as you relax the restrictions that are in place. Be respectful to teachers and staff. Be mindful that there are people in our community, students, teachers, and families, who have compromised immune systems and are more vulnerable to COVID than most of us. And the decisions you make can have a great impact on them. So I expect you'll hear from a lot of people tonight. You've heard from many others at other meetings who have been in favor of lifting all restrictions immediately. But most of the people I speak to would like a more deliberative, measured approach. So as we reach the, hopefully, end of this pandemic, I'd ask that you be thoughtful and measured as you go forward. Listen to public health professionals, listen to educators who study these issues carefully. I think we're on the goal line, and I hate to see us fumble now. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Spencer Ellingson. This is my first meeting as well. I have 4 kids. 2 of them are in the South School and 2 soon to come, hopefully. So at the beginning of the pandemic, the rallying cry of the public servant has been, follow the data, or we'll listen to the scientists and follow the science. Our federal, state, and local leaders use the mantra of following the data and listening to science. Now that we've lived through COVID for 2 years, we have sufficient data to make science-based and data-driven decisions for our community. I want to share 2 clear data points that are indisputable and are often referenced by the CDC. The first, according to the CDC's data for 5 to 14-year-olds, which makes up the majority of our students, motor vehicle accidents and suicide are each responsible for 10 times and 7 times the number of deaths than from COVID, respectively. So knowing that a motor vehicle accident are 10 times more likely to result in your child's mortality, how many legislators right now are drafting bills to require parents to have their children wear bike helmets while riding in the car to add extra protection in the event of a crash? Because according to data, that bill would be significantly more beneficial to our children's well-being than a requirement to wear a mask in school. Data point number 2. From the New York Times this morning, very reputable news source. According to the CDC, the average weekly chance that a boosted person died of COVID was about 1 in a million during October, November. The chance that an average American will die in a car crash this week, including our teachers who are potentially immunocompromised or elderly, your chance of dying in a car crash this week is significantly higher, about 2.4 per million, so 2.5 times the chances of dying in a car crash this week than dying from COVID. With a booster shot, COVID resembles other respiratory illnesses that have been around for years. For the elderly and immunocompromised, COVID can be debilitating. We all agree. However,
2 minutes.
Just as fatal is the flu. Almost done. That's the data. We have vaccines. We have boosters that mitigate the risk of COVID with similar risk profile of every other everyday activities. Please relieve our children of the burden of owning the COVID mitigation strategy.
Good evening. My name is Anya Stevens, and I am a sophomore at New Canaan High School. I'm here this evening to voice my support for wearing masks through the remainder of cold and flu season. I am 15 years old, and I have cystic fibrosis. Cystic fibrosis is a chronic disease that impacts my lung function, and is extremely important that I manage my way through cold and flu season well. A simple cold that you may have, well, for me, that can turn into pneumonia, and my lung function can drop from 100%, which is normal, to 70% within just a few days. And I would normally end up in the hospital. I am double vaccinated and boosted because I believe in science. Masks are and have been an effective mitigation strategy at New Canaan Public Schools. And even before COVID, I have been wearing a mask within New Canaan Public Schools since I entered SACS in 5th grade. During cold and flu season, I have worn a mask for the past 6 years. Wearing a mask is completely manageable. Even with my compromised lung function, I have been able to wear a mask while going to school and participating in sports. I play field hockey, ice hockey, and I run track. And when I say participating in sports, I wear the mask fully over my face, nose completely covered, unlike others that don't cover the nose or have it just draped around the chin. My pulmonologist at Yale New Haven has even told me that if a person with asthma was wearing a mask properly, they should have no problems breathing compared to someone like myself with cystic fibrosis. I'm sure that everyone this evening has someone in their family that is either immunocompromised, like me, with a chronic disease like asthma, diabetes, or cancer, or has a parent or grandparent that is at risk for severe reactions to COVID. Wearing masks to help mitigate the spread of COVID during cold and flu season is doing our part to protect those people in our lives. It may be a sacrifice, but in the middle of a pandemic, it's the least that we can do to protect our families and loved ones. I've spoken with a number of my classmates who also support the strategies, and so we can continue to attend school in person. Thank you for your support, and I really hope we can continue the mask mandate.
Kate Sylvester. 2 weeks from today will mark the 1-year anniversary of the month my husband almost died from the dreaded COVID-19. Andrew, age 37 at the time, with no underlying conditions, an avid skier and active father, quickly deteriorated and was hospitalized for 21 days. The interminable 3 weeks mostly consisted of dread and fear. The strain of life all around was obvious to our boys. As we well know, children are very perceptive and aware of their environment. One day, Teddy, who had only started speech therapy several months earlier, reached for my hand and said, "Don't worry, Mommy, everything will be okay." His first sentence he's ever said. Teddy had been diagnosed with childhood apraxia of speech and has been in speech therapy 3 times a week since he was 2. Childhood apraxia of speech is an uncommon speech disorder in which a child has difficulty making accurate movements when speaking. A child with CAS will not learn speech sounds in typical order and will not make progress without treatment. The mask he now wears 5 days a week in his preschool 3s class has made his progress stagnant. My inner fight got my family through the hardest time of our lives. Teddy and Brooks watched my emotion. They saw the exhaustion on my face and the tears through my smile. Life is hard and beautiful, but it's real. We can't shield them from everything as much as we want to, and we know a mask is shielding them from nothing but a normal existence. Our experience was real, but my husband and I both strongly believe, and based on many reputable studies, that life can return to normal for most children by all that we have learned about this virus, masks, and its weakening structure. The fear and burden is not for all of the children to carry. They are not physically at risk from COVID, but Connecticut's policies have put them at risk mentally. They did not live with these restrictions and fear-inducing rhetoric regarding other illnesses that come and go. Not only has a virus and now masking children become politicized, but so is empathy. Those for masking say those who want to have a choice have no empathy for the immunocompromised or the elderly or the rest of the community, which just simply isn't true. Where is the empathy for these children who are the future of our community? Children are an integral part of our society because without them, communities would cease to exist. We as parents know what's best for our children. Give us the choice to do what is best for our families. There are only 12 states with still under mask mandates, and even worse, only 7 who are insistent that this must include 5 and under. Where is the COVID apocalypse happening in all the states besides these 12? Why should children be prisoners? We are here to give our families a choice.
2 minutes are up. Thank you.
My name is Karis Homestead. I'm the father of 4 children in New Canaan schools, South, Sachs, and New Canaan High School. I'm also a proud American, and I echo the statement by Patrick Henry, give me liberty or give me death. I'm here to add my voice to the growing local opposition to school mask mandates. This is not some fringe movement by deranged parents. Not only do we love our children, but we also are highly educated. In fact, a petition was drafted by 2 former math professors from UCLA and Caltech who now reside in our town. It includes an overwhelming amount of data and already has hundreds of signatures from local residents and lays out in detail the need to rid our schools of mask mandates. I encourage others in this audience and in the town to sign it, and I ask the board to give heed to the collective concern. An honest observer would conclude that there hasn't been any incivility in this debate in our town, other than a member of the town council calling last week's meeting, quote, a circus. There has been the genuine expression of concern by loving and passionate parents. An honest observer would also question, if there were no legitimate grievances, why were our students suddenly given more mask breaks last week and allowed to have snack time inside? It would seem that the administration is keen on gaslighting us instead of collaborating with us. Yes, there are state mandates, but we should fight these mandates on behalf of our children. We certainly should not entertain any additional mitigation strategies. These mitigation strategies need to go away immediately. Only 16 states, which I read, it might only be 14, only 16 states in this nation have mandates, and our state, as one of those 16, is not performing any better than those 34 states that don't have them. Yet my children suffer. We are diminishing their high school, their Sachs, and their South School experiences. The data is clear. Why do we not follow the data? It is also painfully clear to me as a parent the damage the masks have caused with the speech development in my kindergarten son and the anxieties my teenage girls bring home with them for 2 years of covering up in these silly masks. Those concerns were brought up last week, but were dismissed in an administrative email as misinformation. The apathy has ignited our passion. This passion doesn't make us uncivil, but it makes us relentless parents. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi,
so we're,
I'm Lisa
excuse me,
Silver,
just,
and I'm here representing.
Oh, excuse me, just one, sorry. And we're at 15 minutes on public comment, so I would just like to check in with the board and with the community and see approximately how many more people wish to address the board. Should you show by raised hands? Okay, so it looks like we can extend for another 10 minutes? 10 or 15 minutes, looks like it might get long. Okay. Somebody like to make that motion? Brendan, second. Julie, all in favor? Okay, please go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm here representing about 19 families, some of whom are in the audience with me today, and some who will be writing to you via email if they haven't done so already. We are here with a common voice to say that we support local control, we support rolling back mitigation strategies. We want what's best for our kids, but we're also asking that we do it deliberately, strategically. We can't go from 100 to 0. We've got to take a very strategic approach to how we do it. We all want the same end goal. That's the great news. We might differ on how to get there, but we all support steps towards that end goal and towards the objective of keeping our kids in school and our schools open. So we ask you to consider just 3 things. First, consider assessing and measuring as you roll back strategies. It doesn't have to be all taken away at once. Let's roll a few at a time. We might find a surge in the future where we have anecdotal data from our schools where we know some strategies may or may not work. We may find we need one, a combination of a couple, or none at all. But let's take a little time. Let's not just be expedient about it, but be more deliberate in how we roll it out. Second, we want to say, please bring along the entire ecosystem. You are the conduit to our community and our schools. We hope you will actually consider the other stakeholders who our decisions will impact. We're talking bus drivers, staff, teachers, the unions who support them, and our entire ecosystem. We would love that our teachers get a voice because they have been with us from the beginning of the pandemic, and they have really contributed to the success of our schools. Third, we want to thank Dr. Lutzy. You've been really phenomenal in the entire pandemic. You have an ironclad plan that has gotten us through so much. I have sisters who have children in different states and different countries, and their kids have not been in school. That has been disastrous for their kids socially. It's been a really long haul, and we want to thank you for keeping us in school. All we ask is that you consider his recommendations heavily. He's gotten us through this, and he has a sense for what we can roll back and when. And I think it should be considered. And above all, thank you for all of your support for our kids.
Good evening. My name is Brooks Lindberg. I'm a parent of 5 kids. I've gone all through New Canaan schools, 2 still here at the high school. I want to voice my strong support this evening for local control and elimination of the mask mandate. We have heard many points of view here, and it's obvious to me that the mandates that have been promulgated have manifestly failed. We look at our neighbor down south in New York City and all the different states and everything that people have had different mandates. There's essentially zero correlation between imposition of mask mandates and the subsequent spread of COVID. It just is not working. And so however well-intentioned this may have been and prudent at the beginning of the pandemic when we knew very little about the virus, as it seems now we have a maniacal focus on one risk factor at the expense of many other risk factors. Kids to learn, to socialize, they need to see each other. And so we should stop with theater that does nothing and instead allow families to support what they believe is appropriate. Anyone who wants to wear a mask should be entitled to wear a mask, but anyone who doesn't should not be forced to do so. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Lara Kelly. I am here tonight to add my voice of support for mask choice in our schools and local control of our district. It's time to allow our children to choose for themselves how they would like to breathe and when they need a mask break. Like many members of our community, our entire family contracted COVID. Unlike so many, we contracted the virus in February 2021, and our family was severely hit. My husband was hospitalized and in the ICU unit, spent months on oxygen medication and physical therapy. All 4 of my children, 3 of whom attend NCPS, had wide-ranging symptoms. The virus took an extreme physical and mental toll on our family. I spent many of the long winter nights of 2021 wondering if I would become a widow and worrying about the effects of long COVID on my children. I am now spending the long winter nights of 2022 worrying about what I call long COVID compliance. My 12-year-old daughter is not thriving at SACS. She's increased anxiety from teachers threatening to lower class participation grades for not wearing masks correctly or counting noses as they take attendance. My 2nd grade son asked me, "Mom, can't you just call the school and tell them that I need a break? I'm happier without my mask." My kindergartner comes home and says things like, "My classroom is so cold, it's frozen like Elsa." When we see kids outside of school, she's shy and whispers, "I don't know if that's my friend. I don't know her face." Each of my children in their own way are struggling to find the joy or the purpose of school this year. As the current studies are showing, and the hospitalization numbers have always shown, the virus is not a threat to our children. Why are we digging in our heels and insisting that our children carry the burden of adults' anxiety and fear? Our schools are filled with capable teachers and administrators. It's time that they care and protect themselves and stop laying the burden of safety across our children's faces. As Eva Campbell reminded us last week, history's atrocities are often carried out locally by compliant yes men. Unmask our children now.
Hi, my name is Abby Duncan, and I live here in New Canaan on Owen Oak Ridge. I've lived here most of my life, as has my husband. I'm here to speak on behalf of our 4 children, ages 4 to 13, regarding your mask mandates. I sat here and listened to the passionate appeals made last week by members of our community. I've heard through the grapevine that teachers are feeling attacked this week. I come from a family... Coming from a family of educators, I know how hard these teachers and you all up here have worked pre-pandemic, and I no doubt it has quadrupled over the past 2 years. My mother's a teacher here in town. I'm deeply involved in our children's preschool, and education is in my blood. This isn't about parents not respecting and appreciating how hard teachers and administrators and staff are working. Everyone is tired, frustrated, and ready for all of this to end. I'm incredibly appreciative to all of you and to all of our excellent educators. Parents are simply asking for choice as it relates to their children. These mandates are seeping into our children's psyches in a way that none of us can fully understand. I've often said the true measure of this pandemic will be the toll it will take on one's mental health. Children are particularly vulnerable. These mandates are affecting their most formative developmental years, literally shaping their perception of the world, the way they interact with it, and their place in it. Let me give you one personal example from last week. I was in a store in town with my 4-year-old daughter. She pleaded with me with her eyes and whispered, "Mama, please, Mama, can I take off my mask? Can I pull it down so I can breathe? I'm far away from everyone, and I promise I won't hurt anyone." Hearing her say that brought tears to my eyes, and it's something that will haunt me for years. What are we doing to these children? She's 4. The mask mandate, thank you. The mask mandate itself in schools has proved inconsequential according to all credible studies that I've read. On top of that, the CDC has stated that masks that our children have been wearing are insufficient and ineffective at curtailing virus spread. Body of evidence tells us conclusively that masks do not stop transmission. And now that the virus has reached endemic status, honest acknowledgement of all the risk for our children is needed. The CDC has provided ample data, I'm almost done, that shows the risk of severe disease associated with COVID in children is de minimis away from the kids who are compromised with pre-existing serious conditions. Interestingly, in Sweden, with no lockdowns and no mask mandates, they have 0 deaths among their children.
2 minutes are up.
I know, I'm coming. All these points aside, the CDC has said that at most, the right masks do provide protection for the individual wearing the mask. So if anyone, teacher or child, is concerned, they have the ability to protect themselves. This information from the CDC's implies that these people should not be impacted by others' actions. My children living mask-free will not impact others' health. Let's give our children their childhood back. Let's respect each other and allow for choice moving forward. Thank you.
My name is Svava Bragason. I live here in New Canaan, and I have 2 children in the New Canaan Public Schools. I have a 6th grader at Saks, and I have a sophomore here at the high school. My sophomore is in special education. Through the efforts of the New Canaan Health Department and the New Canaan Board of Education and New Canaan Public Schools, New Canaan has been able, with health mitigation measures in place, to keep schools open for a earlier and longer time compared to other communities which are not putting these measures in place. I hear a lot of people citing studies. Studies have also shown that school districts that have universal masking measures in place are able to keep their schools open longer. I urge with fewer shutdowns compared to school districts who do not implement these same mitigation measures. I urge our Board of Education to take measured data into account and keep our schools, with the goal to keep our schools as open as possible and serving as many students as possible. And I would like to commend our board for prioritizing especially the students that need the in-person time the most to make sure that everything is being done to be able to serve those students. And I thank you very much for everything you have been doing and for everything you are continuing to do. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Ryan Sullivan. I live at 52 St. George Lane. I'm speaking tonight to ask this board to do everything in its power to end masking our kids in schools and other COVID protocol. And I'm asking to have a frank, honest discussion about the cost and benefit of keeping up this charade. Dr. Lutzy, I was here last week to hear your update on COVID in the school district, and while I recognize that you have to work within the framework set by our governor, it strikes me that all the time and effort spent on these restrictions is ineffective. Look at your data. The protocol aren't working. Triple the number of students testing positive year on year, huge percentages of your staff are not at work. If you started with the scientific hypothesis that if we mask, distance, and isolate, COVID won't spread, your data prove that hypothesis to be false. The benefit of all these restrictions is exceedingly low. If you listened to the parents last week, you should have heard that the cost of these measures is high and growing. I share these concerns. My son came home today complaining of a headache. Only 2 mask breaks today, lunch and snack time. Some of this board have asked to deliberate this cost-benefit analysis. Others, like Mr. Ash and Mr. Hayes, will not consider a change in course, despite no evidence that these measures are working. Their logic, stay the course, has more holes than the Swiss cheese in our school's risk model. Dr. Lutzy, I found your email this week to be dismissive and tone-deaf to the appeals of the members of the community that are speaking up about the cost to our children. I find it offensive that 203 Action and others have labeled us as alt-right, as if we're some fringe militant group. I am not spreading misinformation. I am a politically independent parent that has asked to have a considerate discussion of the changing facts in science and acknowledge that some mea culpa is needed. Please create an appeal to the governor and the state legislature for local control over COVID mitigation strategies, and when possible, get rid of these useless mandates. I have sent my letter to the governor, which I have sent to you all, and it's time for this board and administration to do their part for the betterment of our children, their experience, and mental health. Thank you.
How many more speakers do we have? How many more speakers? 1, 2, 3? Oh, 4. Okay, we'll take those 4, and then I think we need to move on.
Hi, I'm Dietrich Moore. I have 2 children in the New Canaan public school system. Having seen the impact of the mask mandates on my son, I want to add my voice in favor of local control and to rid our schools of mask mandates with a sense of urgency. If people feel strongly, given their health circumstances or belief, that they want to wear masks, N95 or a cloth or other, they should have the opportunity to do so. But it should not be forced on those who do not. My kids feel tired and uncomfortable during the day. We can't let the cure be worse than the disease. Countries around the world and states around the country are removing their COVID restrictions, and it's disappointing to hear that we're behind Darien. Hopefully we can rectify this immediately.
Here's someone else.
Don't mind me, sir. Thank you. Jonathan Breen, Indian Rock Road. It's a little loud. Broken leg and all, I'm here because it's that important to be here to talk about ending the mask mandate, at least giving control, optional control, and bringing it back to the local district where it belongs. Dr. Lozzi, the letter's a great start. It's not enough. So we need more from you, and we need you to communicate that to us every week, every board meeting. Who are you talking to? When did you call them? How long was the call? What did they say? What did they do? As you know, the executive order is not just about the governor. It gives the power to the commissioner of the Department of Public Health, and also gives the power to the Department of Education to create the rules, operational rules, including mask mandates. So it's not just about the governor. It's not just about legislator. Even with this executive order, you need to do more. You need to talk to these commissioners because they need to know from us. We need to gather up with the other superintendents from other towns. What about a letter in the paper signed by all the superintendents around here? What about going on television, News 12? I saw you there when you talked about remote learning. Where are you on masking in schools? We all know, I actually want to thank a lot of the people here to come up. It's so brave. It's hard to get up here and talk, right? I mean, I bet you everyone here would get up here and talk, and my kids are begging me not to come up here and talk to embarrass myself. But this is absurd. And you want to go through the data, as someone had mentioned before, the odds of getting hit and struck by and dying from a bolt of lightning is 1 in 1 million. The odds of dying from running is 1 in 1 million. The odds of dying from COVID after getting vaccinated is 1 in 10 million. So just think about that. The odds of choking is 1 in 2,700. So you want to talk about data and science and everything? Marjorie Smelkinson, infectious disease scientist at the National Institute of Health, says the benefits from wearing masks is unproven and no longer justifiable. I'll stop there. I can go on for hours. I think it's time now to get this control back to the board. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Alessia Miller. I'm not certain which of the board members were on the New Canaan Advertiser coffee 2 weeks ago where I spoke about my son, whose brain development has suffered due to his incapability of wearing his glasses along with his mask. Allow me to refresh your memory for those of you who were not. He's 6. He's been in a mask since he was 4, a third of his life. He already has sensory processing disorder for which he struggles on a daily basis. Now, for the last 2 years of his life, he's had an appendage strapped to his face, which has made it impossible to wear his glasses. I've worked with his ophthalmologist, and none of the wipes and glasses work. He can't see properly, so he cannot process images properly, and his brain can't develop properly. I've had to sit here for the last 2 years and watch my child's development suffer, try to help him work on his vision when he has been able to be maskless. I have been compliant, as I am aware of the severity of the pandemic. However, it is clear that this pandemic has reached an endemic phase, and as time, the shackles must be taken off. Thank you for those who laughed in the audience about civility. All that a parent wants in this world is to keep their child safe. There is nothing I've been able to do for this child aside from appealing to those who can affect change. You are our voice. Now that you've finally agreed to write a letter to our governor, I can only hope that you continue to put pressure on the legislators on behalf of those who have begged and pleaded with you for a choice. We as parents simply want the ability to make a choice. For those that want to wear one, by all means, allow the choice. And as far as civility goes, I will be civil when people tasked with taking care of my children do their job to protect them and act on their behalf with every fiber of their being and not count them simply as another data point in the statistical study.
Okay.
I'd like the New Canaan teachers
this is the last
to please
speaker,
stand.
and then we'll move on.
My name is Vivian Birdsall, and I am the president of the New Canaan Education Association, the NCEA. What has always made New Canaan exceptional is that we are able to have divergent opinions and communicate them with decorum and respect. It is my responsibility to represent more than 400 New Canaan teachers. As my NCEA executive board and I sat listening to the concerns of parents at the Board of Education meeting on January 24th, I was extremely concerned, as was every teacher who watched the proceedings, especially the elementary teachers of the students who were discussed. Our teachers and administrators have proven time and time again that they are consummate professionals. We are highly educated, dedicated, and passionate, but most importantly, we care about every child in our charge. We do not ask children to sit in front of open windows with fans or eat outside in 16-degree weather. We do not scream in their faces and force them to leave the safety of our schools. We are not pawns for the cause that could easily be discussed in a civil manner. New Canaan teachers work tirelessly to not only teach our students, but keep them safe and engaged. We are the best district in Connecticut, and our superintendent's leadership through the pandemic allowed us to continue to be the best. Safety allowed us to open our schools and teach our students through the pandemic. The strategies our district put in place allowed us to stay open while other districts couldn't. While other districts are struggling to make up for lost curriculum, we are on track. Connecticut state testing proved that. Make no mistake, we are proud to be a part of the New Canaan community, and we will continue to do our very best for the children in our care, as will our administrators, with the leadership of our superintendent, Brian Lutzy, and the support of our Board of Education, the Town Council, and the Board of Finance. You will not find a better school system. You will not find a better group of teachers, and you will not find better leadership anywhere. Thank you.
Thank you all. We'll now move on to the reports and recognition section of our... Oh, okay. This is the last one. Thank you. Yeah, they're also, well, we have public comment again at the end.
My name is Laurel Van Hooser. The following expectation on public comments was put in tonight's agenda. Quote, the Board of Education expects mutual respect, civility, and orderly conduct among all individuals on school property and at school events and in communications with district employees. The Board of Education encourages positive communication and discourages volatile, hostile, or aggressive language or actions. The Board of Education meetings are meetings held in public, not public meetings. The Board expects compliance with rules and expectations. I disagree with the premise that public comments must be positive and not include volatile, hostile, or aggressive language. And I disagree with the insinuation that such language is uncivil. 1, disagreement via public debate is the definition of civil discourse. We're not burning things to the ground. Hashing out our vehement disagreements with our words is perhaps the most civilized thing people can do. Also, saying you disagree with a decision that other people prefer is not, in fact, uncivil. Calling out individual people is not, in fact, uncivil. 2, this is a public forum. The Supreme Supreme Court of the United States upheld our constitutional right to vehemently disagree with public officials and express that disagreement through speech. Quote, "This nation is founded on the profound national commitment to the principle that debate of public issues shall be uninhibited, robust, and wide open, and that it may well include vehement, caustic, and sometimes unpleasantly sharp attacks on public government and public officials. You are all either public officials or public employees. Some of you may not like the tone that some of the public have taken with you lately, but you have no right to expect niceness from our speech under the pretense of civility. Everyone wants to get along and have fun, but these parents will not sacrifice their children on the altar of niceness. Advocate for their children's right to breathe free. Do not so happily comply with the edict to muzzle kids for 7 hours a day for 2 whole years. Do nothing to persuade the government to rescind anti-science mandate for 2 whole years, and then get upset when they criticize you. It is their right and duty to advocate for their children. That is what civility looks like."
We'll now move on to reports and recognition section of our agenda. Tonight, and the goal of tonight's meeting is to discuss an update on COVID-19. So I'll now turn it to Dr. Lutzy to begin that conversation.
Yes, hi. Thank you. Thank you all for coming out tonight. To begin, we thought it would be helpful to share a little bit of a view from inside the schools, recognizing, of course, that people have been unable to go into the school building other than our staff and our students. So I asked on Thursday for each of the principals to just spend a couple of minutes and send over a couple of video clips. I had asked for about a minute per school. Turned into more than that, as you can imagine. But we put them together over the weekend, and I thought that it might just be a good way to begin our discussion tonight. Couldn't agree more with all of the impassioned pleas about keeping our students at the center, and I think that this is a good way to do that. So if you'll humor me for a minute, we're not going to be able to watch it from here as a board, so we've sectioned off some seats right below. And if we can just go over to those seats, they'll queue up the video for us and we can watch that. All right.
Hello. Hello. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, everybody. This morning meeting? This is second grade morning meeting.
Oh, sorry, Romeo.
Good morning. Hi, Romeo.
This is an example of the window that is cracked in the grade 2 classroom with the fan and the plexiglass. And as you can see, the fan is blowing out, not blowing into the classroom. There's also a little window. And right now I'm in a 4th grade classroom, and the kids are writing brief writes. So here's just a glimpse into some of the work that they're doing together. They're working in partners, and they're using their computers, their Chromebooks. Hi guys, good morning. Good morning, everybody.
would say, like, when he woke up that morning, he looked at his calendar.
What are you writing about?
It's a performance brief, right?
Oh. Good.
Your name comes first, and then your partner.
Some optional seating going on here. Excuse me, Henry, I'm going to walk over your feet. Thank you. And then we have a couple of boys who chose to come out and work in the hallway. And this is a grade 1 classroom. They're about to take their foundations assessment.
Take a look here. If you open up to the sticky note, you'll see the number 7 at the top. Okay, we're on unit test 7. Good. I'm going to come around and go ahead. Everybody's good. Everybody has their pencils out and ready to go.
And here's another example of the fan in the window. The window's cracked. The fan is in the window. And the air is being blown out of the window. This is one of our kindergarten classes. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Are we learning the letter U today? Yes. How's your pasta? How's the pasta? Good? This is kindergarten lunch. How's the pasta? Is it good? How's the pasta? Good? Hi. Hi, guys.
Quick view of our second group of 7th graders in the North Capnesium.
We got like 6 minutes.
Quick shot of students out here for the first wave of recess, 8th graders. Get to choose to come out during their lunch wave. Show the chart in a little bit of what allows us to make that decision, whether we have that option or not. Quick view of an 8th grade workshop.
It's always the problem, you know? It's like a common thing.
Orchestral action.
Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
making some amazing creations.
So good. No, they're perfect. As long as you can manage it.
Our 5th grade class working on throwing and catching and accuracy. Getting some good steps in. Got it. 8th grade lunch in the cafeteria with everybody in. The caffeinasiums are still being used, so we have 2 teams in here and 2 teams in the other space.
Join Rubik's Cube.
8th graders on the way to lunch. Quick shot of students passing between classes right now.
Hi. Hi.
All right. Heading between classes. Give me a sec. Come here. I'll tell you.
Having their lunch.
Say that again? So 10-5. Yeah, I agree. I think that, but remember what Ms. Fisher said, it could be also parallel.
Okay, well,
empty
that out, leave it by the sink, and we'll figure it out.
Yeah, so let's do that. Okay.
Okay. Well, are you on a problem here? Let's get you started. You can at least get started
So these are our 3rd graders working in their math class. We're able to work with partners today. And so talking about rectangles and characteristics of those shapes.
If it's the area one, you're going to want to show equations. You can draw it. If it's the quadrilateral one.
Here's the fan in the classroom that's blowing air out. They do have desks and rows, but throughout the day they will rearrange themselves to work in different groupings based on the lesson and the teacher's directions.
Absolutely. We're getting computer settings going, drive set up. So any questions on the Google Doc? Google Drive.
Keep going, nice and loud. Answer his question.
They were pocketing the overcharges and they were like taking them for themselves. They weren't like using it for other people. They were just taking it themselves and embezzling.
Louder.
They were embezzling the funds, not like using them to help other people or like the development.
To the side and to 12, I'm not going to be able to hit it. Here.
Because it's not going to be like, I'm an author, I'm beginning with the end in mind, and I'm going to arrange scenes, you know, sort of like in order to like get to my ultimate.
This is a kindergarten classroom working in groups on their mat. This is a 1st grade classroom. As you can see, the fan is at the top of the window blowing the air out. And here are students learning in a 1st grade classroom in their groups.
Get your pencil ready.
This is a 2nd grade class working on their writing unit. This is a 2nd grade classroom enjoying a read aloud.
Okay.
This is a third grade classroom participating in their Spanish Plus program. This is a fourth grade classroom learning a math lesson.
In here. So now there's my 6, right?
Students participating in PE classes. This is a class in art. This is a third grade classroom in library class. This is a third grade classroom participating in ICT special. First grade students getting their lunches. This is second graders eating lunch.
As you can tell from the narration, there was no good, bad, indifferent, and that's not what this is what really was about for us. It was just to get a sense of some of the things happening in our classrooms. Okay? There were some questions about ventilation and about the system and our ability to balance ventilation, what have you. So we asked Dan Clark and Scott Olson to join us tonight. They're going to demo for us, or just at least show us some examples of the energy management system, which is something actually we talked about a few years ago and we invested in as a district. And as we have implemented this system, I think it's pretty impressive what we're sort of able to do and as they take a look at it. So I thought it'd be a good opportunity to give you just a 5 or 10 minute overview on that and take a look at sort of how some of that works. So Dan and Scott, if you are here, why don't you come on down? And if you're not, we're in trouble. There you are. All right. And we'll just flip right over, and then we'll go back up and take it from there, but just figured while we were here.
Just have to change out a piece of equipment. Good evening. So, the New Canaan public school system is committed to providing comfortable facilities every day for teaching and learning. Achieving this goal encompasses several areas of our operation. Tonight's preparation is on the primary tool that we use to provide thermal comfort in all the schools. The New Canaan Public Schools uses and manages the temperatures in the building with an energy management system, or EMS. I'd like to provide with you a presentation of our energy management system. These systems monitor and control the operation of our heating and cooling systems with comprehensive software programs to provide a safe, efficient, and comfortable environment for staff and students in all of our schools. There's 2 systems that we have. The Honeywell system manages the elementary schools and SOC school, and the Allerton system manages the high school. These software systems control and monitor the operation of thousands of mechanical contact points from equipment such as boilers, air conditioners, ventilation system components, heating and cooling system water piping, exhaust, and many other field devices that are out in the school, including individual thermostats in classrooms, offices, and hallways. If there are any HVAC operational issues, there's numerous ways for the staff to report it, either with their call to the custodian on duty or sending a school dude, which is our maintenance request platform. And we also have monitoring systems that will let our mechanics know when there's a failure in a component or where we need to have some attention on some of those thousands of different points in the schools. Low temperature, for example, which enables, and so with our alarm system in place, which will contact us automatically, it enables our mechanics to respond quickly to address the problem. Laptops are a big part of what their toolbox has, and so they can quickly obtain what the information is for that particular problem, and identify and correct the issue, clear the alarm, and restore the equipment to service. And all of us have laptops that we use, so if there's something off shift, that we'll still get the alarms on our laptops. So it's very convenient to handle these things remotely. So Scott is our assistant manager, and he's going to take us through the schools. You can see the map there, and we'll show you how our systems work.
Hello, everyone. So I'm here tonight in hopes to just kind of show everybody and have everybody give them a better understanding of our building management systems. So I was hoping just to, in lieu of time and keep things moving, our elementary schools are pretty much the same size with the same equipment. So what I'm going to do is I'll just shoot to one for now. Maybe we start with West here. So this is our home page for West Elementary School. We also control the lighting along with the HVAC system for this school. So if we go to the heart of the school here, the boiler room, we have full control over the boilers, and we could read all the temperatures at any time, and this is all real time. We do have alarms put in place for low water temp for the heating season. So we do get phone calls if anything happens, no matter what time of day or night, so we could respond immediately. We also can see our main pumps, and if you look down at the lower, where the cursor is here, it'll show the supply temperature of the water and the return when it comes back to the boiler to be heated again. So 154 degrees, that's looking pretty good. It'll also tell us if we have any alarms on this page, but we'll also get an email and a phone call as well. But this definitely helps us before we do go to the site to just kind of troubleshoot and see if it's something we could be done remotely. So if we go, sorry, my computer's a little glitchy here. So now if we go to a classroom, I can show you all the different points that we can control and monitor. Let's just, so if we go to a typical classroom here, now most of the rooms we try to keep in an occupied mode between give or take 68 to 71 degrees. And that's for when the room is occupied. We do have aux sensors there, so after about a half an hour to 45 minutes, the lights do go off. And we have a set point that's about 2 degrees less, just to be energy efficient. But when the kids and staff do come back, it bounces back. It's only 2 degrees. It's a pretty quick response time. Right now, it's in the unoccupied mode, and it's actually reached its temperature just about, we got it set for 70 degrees, it's 69.7, so there's no reason for the valve to open or turn on. But on the right-hand side here, we do have overrides for the fan motor, the damper that allows the fresh air to come in, and the heating valve. We do keep, weather permitted, we keep the dampers cracked to allow fresh air to come in to each classroom. Now that air, obviously being cold, is treated through a heating coil, so it's not that we're blowing cold air through the univent. The water temperature in this coil at the moment is 112 degrees, so once that motor turns on and starts blowing the air through, it's nice and up to temperature. So that's pretty much a typical classroom there. And as you can see, I mean, you can read all the temperatures there now. Everything looks like it's 68 to 70 degrees right now. Now, once the custodial and all the staff are gone, it'll go into more of a setback where things shut down, and we keep it to about 60 degrees for most of the building. So if it needs to, it will turn on overnight, but it's good to have it set back a little bit just to be efficient. And we do start the system up again a couple hours before staff and students enter the buildings to give it time to get back up to speed. So that's kind of the gist of it. But I mean, we could see pretty much anything. We could schedule times and look at alarm pages. We really do have a lot of control to the system. I was going to move over to the high school, but does anybody have any questions before I leave the Honeywell system? Okay. All right, so let me close this. So this is our Allerton system, and this is our main home page here. And as you can see, it shows the different sections of our building. Definitely a big building with a lot going on. So here on the left-hand side, we have all of the different scheduling for different times. We do have a lot of events at the high school, so there's a lot of after hours and weekend events going on. So we make sure everything's scheduled properly, whether it be indoor or in and out, I guess. And once again, we have our main heating page here, where it shows the main boiler room. We have 3 boilers. One was for the domestic hot water, but we recently switched over to 2 smaller condensing boilers for the domestic hot water, so this one is more of a spare in case we need it. It's still tied into the system. Once again, it's showing us the hot water is leaving at 180 degrees and it's coming back at 167. This building stays on just a little bit longer, usually because of events and just the custodians here making sure the building's clean for the next day. But once again, we could see the speed of the pumps. We could flip boilers without even being on site if need be, if one of them goes into alarm. Yeah, it's really, I mean, we could see pretty much every point we need to on here. So if we go to, I don't know, if we just go to one of the classrooms here, this is going to be a little bit of a different setup, but we could actually see the ductwork in this system coming off of each air handler unit. We have 2 closets on this main floor, air handler 12 and 11. If we just happen to pick one section, we could actually dig a little deeper and actually go to each classroom. Let's see, if we just pick, let's go to this room here. So this is a VAV which controls, we have a VAV pretty much per classroom controlled by a thermostat. So they do have a control over a few degrees at the high school. Generally, again, we try to keep it between 68 and 71 degrees. So it's showing the damper here at 37%. The room is actually 71 degrees, which is great. It's at the high side, so that's why the damper is closing a little bit. And the reheat valve, which you see up here, is open 7%, just getting a little bit to squeak by so it doesn't go too low. We could read the CFM, the desired and what it's actually reading, so that's looking pretty on point there. And it's showing it's occupied, which it will be till, I don't know, probably about 9, 10 o'clock. So that's pretty much a typical classroom. And if we need to, we could always force the damper open, force it closed if we're having an issue. And once again, it's just a tool for us to look at these rooms before we go on site, just to give us a little insight on if we need certain parts when we go to service it. Yeah, that's typical. That's a typical classroom. We have bigger areas with bigger units. We could even go to the auditorium here. We have 5 sensors, and then we have one separate one for the stage, because that's actually a different unit. That's just for the stage area. But right now, everything's showing 70 degrees, 71 degrees. And we could even see what the air handler's doing for this room. Might just take a second. Okay, so the supply fan is running at 60%, and the return fan is running at 50%, which is pretty normal there. If it was trying to cool down, that would probably ramp up. You might see it at 80%, 100%. But it'll react depending on the temperature that it's reading. Yeah, all the reheat valves are closed. Since we got people in the room, it's probably just trying to just keep a little cool air running through. So that's pretty much it. I mean, we could even, when we first get in the morning, we usually go to a page like this and just do a quick run through to see if we have any issues. This shows all the air handlers for the entire school. So it's a quick summary page just to get on it and see right away if we have to go to the school before staff and kids show up. Most of the maintenance department's in at 6 o'clock, so it gives us a couple hours to react to any issues that we have, to make sure it's taken care of before everybody comes in. So that's kind of one of our routines when we first get in, is we just go through the system. And then obviously we have our school dude, which gives us tickets for just any issues that the teachers or staff are having. So so that's kind of pretty much it in a nutshell, without going on for hours and boring everybody. So yeah, if you want, I'll keep going, but I'm sure I'll hear snoring in a few minutes. So.
We enjoyed this. So.
But yeah, if there's any questions later on, please feel free. And I do actually. I'm a licensed electrician. Yeah.
Thank you, Dan and Scott, for that update. It's very helpful to see that side of our buildings. Never knew. Erica, you had a question.
Yeah, my question is for Scott. Just to make sure I understood that correctly, when kids are outside of a classroom for, say, recess and lunch, it sounds like the air temperature could go down as low as 66 until then they go back in the room, and that triggers it to go back up in the range of 68 to 71? Is that what, I wasn't sure if I heard that correctly, so I just want to check.
I can certainly follow up to make sure that, whoops. Try that again.
Oh.
Okay. But I believe he mentioned so they said it's like 68 to 71 or so. So actually, I think you're correct. So it can go down to 66, because what happens is when they return to the room, the body temperature also can bring it back up. It wouldn't go below that because they have a 2-degree setback, right? Is that what you're? Yeah. Okay.
Other questions? Okay. All right. Next, we move on to the protocol update and discussion.
Yes, and I didn't give this to Penny. Let's see. So, and thank you for that. Thank you for humoring us. I know it's a little different being in the auditorium versus the Wagner room where we have presentations. But in order to sort of structure our conversation tonight, I thought it might be helpful to take a document that we had shared with the board prior to the beginning of the school year that had outlined some of the mitigation strategies and to update that based on where we are today. And as you know, already as we've gone through the year, we started in one place. When we returned from the holidays, we had to sort of make some adjustments and changes. And now as we're seeing this most recent surge subside a bit, we're looking at stepping back from that again to really return to, in many ways, the operations that we had in the fall as we were working through. So I thought for our conversation, this might be a good way to structure, and we can work through, and I'm glad to add more context, speak more about anything, or certainly, open for discussion. To begin, and you'll note it, initially when we had looked at this and published this out in the summer, we were still looking at numbers of cases as a primary indicator. So that's, while it's a data point, but it's not our primary indicator anymore. As a matter of fact, if you'll go all the way back to the last school year, when the decisions were being made about in-person schooling or hybrid or fully remote, they'd even set numbers, like case rate numbers per 100,000 people. And that was the initial attempt to try to create some sort of a framework around that decision making. We didn't follow it right out of the gate, which helped us to bring our students back more quickly because the DPH and State Department of Ed quickly realized that those numbers, while it looked great in the summertime, as we returned and as the pandemic itself sort of ebbed and flowed and cases would come in waves and then start to subside, that they were better off having the school districts working within their local community, making these decisions, working with their staff, working with their faculty, and again, working in partnership with the SDE and the Department of Public Health. But sort of those numbers were more arbitrary than useful when we were looking at it. So I say that because if you go back to the original version of this document, the first thing you'll see is a graph of case numbers. And we've taken that off, so as we go into it. So again, to begin just sort of to structure our conversation here, the first thing that we had on here was vaccinations, right, as we came back into the new school year. And you'll see that some things have shifted around that. But since the beginning of the school year, the governor and governor's office and through executive orders were requiring all school employees to be either vaccinated or to submit weekly tests, right? And that we've been doing since September. We've talked a lot about some of the executive orders that are being continued. That executive order is not one that Governor Lamont has requested to be continued as he goes forward, and he's looking at sunsetting that on February 15th. So we have to continue up until February 15th, but then we'll no longer be requiring unvaccinated staff to be submitting their weekly tests, prior to coming into school. Why that's important a little bit later when we talk about sort of guests in the school and things like that. So we'll get there in a little bit, but I thought that context would be helpful. And I do want to mention again that our New Canaan Health Department, as mentioned a couple of times tonight, continues to be great partners with us with all of this. And anyone interested in getting vaccinated or getting boosted can just simply go to their website, and they're running clinics typically a couple times a week. And Jen over there has even sort of accommodated people's individual schedules if need be, recognizing that sometimes it's just a one-off and somebody wants to go through and get that done. So the health department is there for anybody who is interested in getting vaccinated. I'm going to just continue through? Yeah. Okay.
Just raise your hand.
Okay.
If you have questions, just raise your hand, and otherwise we'll just keep going.
Okay. So the next piece on this document is the universal mask wearing, which has been certainly something that's been discussed quite a bit, and something that we think about daily. We talk about it regularly. Just a little bit about the background to this. It did begin with Governor Lamont's Executive Order 12A, which then became 13A. And I think it is correct, somebody had said before, that it's actually a little more nuanced than that. in that in the executive order, Governor Lamont is authorizing the Connecticut Department of Public Health and the State Department of Ed to give guidance, or give binding guidance to districts as far as mask wearing goes. So it's Governor Lamont authorizing the Department of Public Health to work with the State Department of Ed and publish that mask guidance. So there's 2 steps. And I've tried to share that in previous communications with some links and things for people, but I guess people know because that was explained tonight a little bit. Go ahead.
So can you just maybe certainly think for the board, but I think for the audience also, touch on, because if you go into some of the DPH guidance, there's a lot of different language. There's a lot of like mays, there's some shalls, there's some guidance, there's some optional, there's some required. Can you help us kind of parse that? Because there's some things that they seem to want to actually let the schools take care of and maybe even be more flexible if the situation needs. And there's some things that it feels like if you go through, I think it's EO number 9, that delegates a lot of authority to the Department of Education, the Department of Public Health, and I guess the Department of Special Education. How should we be thinking about the various guidelines that come down and what's really required versus recommended versus optional?
Mm-hmm. So the couple of things on something like the mask language, right? And it is. So early on, when this approach was being taken with the governor and the Department of Public Health, the Connecticut Association of Public School Superintendents, CAPS, reached out to their attorneys to ask for a legal opinion on that question about sort of is this a mandatory thing, right? Does this executive order, what does it say to us? And the feedback came back that an executive order does have the force of law, right? And so the mandate as the language is, and that language is pretty clear in that one as far as the mask goes.
Yeah, no, I think related to the EO and things like that, there's certain things that is definitive, like, and I would agree. And I think it's the next layer down that is, some of it clearly would be covered and other of it's not. And I just think trying to understand some of that, even when, and I know we're going to talk about it a little bit, even when it comes to, when you can have waivers or when within a certain construct you could like remove the mask for the 30-minute lesson versus, like, that's the type of thing that I think a lot of people, they understand the EO is there and it's going to be through February 15th and we'll see what Lamont and the legislature does. But some of these other things and how they impact people and students kind of daily, and where there might be either flexibility or kind of more nuanced things that we can kind of custom by student would be at least informative to just understand where that is.
Sure. And so the State Department of Ed put together their Advance, Adapt, Achieve document over the summer that really sort of works through the Department of Public Health and the State Department of Ed by virtue of the executive order, which authorized them to make the school operational, set the school operational guidelines. So there's, I think what happens is they talk about the mitigation strategies as you go through that document. So you'll see there's things like the physical distancing, there is cohorting, there are other pieces to that. But given the individual nature of each school system, they don't tell you how to do it. They don't tell you what to do, but they don't say how to do it because every district is different. So for instance, and you can sort of picture how that would be different, right? So they give you the what, and then they allow districts to make the decisions around how to operationalize what they're asking. And as we've done that on a continuum, right? So if we go all the way back to the start of the 2020-2021 school year, we were, as I think, and I think appropriately, and people have mentioned, we were on one side of the continuum around these things where our cohorting, for instance, was very strict. And it was so strict that we were teaching world language at Saks, where, because it's usually a cross-teamed experience, a teacher was in the room with a single team, and the other team in the building was virtually participating in that class, even though they're in the same building, because of that, the cohorting and the structure around that. That in 2020, 2021 was the right thing to do, knowing what we knew and how much we didn't know. We're no longer doing that, right? So there's still some degree of cohorting slightly, but as we came into the school year, into 21-22, in the fall, we mentioned to our administrators as they were building the schedule, normal operations, allow the students to go across as need be, but build it in a way that if we have to pull back a little bit, we can do that, right? So as we went through from August through December, we were wide open with that, but then over the January break, as Omicron surged and we were trying to navigate all of that, we asked them to implement that shift where instead of all 4 teams crossing, 2 would cross instead. And they looked across the schedule and made a couple of adaptations to it and put that in place. Now, as we look at sort of the surge ending and coming out in the next couple of weeks, we anticipate we look to go back to the way it was in the fall. So we've never had to build a flexible schedule like that before. But those are some of the things, that's just one example of some of the things that we sort of, the guidance is here, the mitigation strategies are kind of outlined the way they are. We build a system around it, and then we flex to be kind of adaptive and to respond to the conditions on the ground. And I think we can kind of do that as we go through each of these mitigation strategies because, again, they're not really going to tell us how to do it. They'll give us the what, but we've got to think about the implementation, and then we do look at sort of to what degree and look at that question based on, the guidance from the Department of Public Health and SDE and kind of our local where we can. I will say that, just for what it's worth, a couple little things. The Department of Public Health and Department of Ed have hosted a Tuesday morning call for superintendents, and over the last probably 6 months or so, they opened it up broader for board chairs and others. And so every Tuesday morning, we have an opportunity to get an update. Now, they've slowed that down a little, so where it was every other week recently. But they give us an update on sort of what they're seeing across the state. And there's a Q&A as well, and it's an hour long. So that's, since it started, probably almost 2 years ago, haven't missed one of those. And we've been in those conversations and, asking questions and talking through. The other thing that's been helpful is I was very fortunate to be asked to join what they call the Rules Committee. Essentially, it's the group from DPH, a group from SDE, some public health folks like the director of the public health program over at Yale, UConn, there's pediatricians there's health directors. We come together pretty regularly. Certainly in the past, it was every week for over a year. Again, that's slowed down a little bit recently, but that was an opportunity to share with them sort of what we're seeing on the ground and what we're seeing in schools, and to ask questions, and learn back. So there's a couple of sort of key points that we were learning about some of these things, and I could even, point was made about sort of advocating. That gave me an opportunity to be at the table and have a voice with them. And I was the only superintendent in the state that was, I sort of representing all of it. So it was very helpful that way, as was the executive director of CAPS, which I mentioned before. The commissioner of education was on those calls, Miguel at first, and now, Charlene. So that's been very helpful as well. So this, again, so we'll go through and sort of we can talk that through and hopefully get some clarity to it, Dan, around that question. So a good, for instance, would be, say, the masks, right? The mask requirement. And we did, and I mentioned that before. So there is some flexibility that's new this year that's available around mask wearing, for instance, in our special education program. And Bill, why don't you talk about that for a brief minute, if you would?
Sure. There are situations where we have students who are identified with special needs aren't always wearing a mask. Some students, it's an incredibly difficult thing for them to do throughout the day. Our most complex and students with the deepest level of need may only be wearing a mask as they transition from one space to another space in the building, but when they're in with their cohort, they may not be wearing a mask for a particular period of time during the day. The other place where we'll sometimes see some students not wearing a mask is during speech and language sessions, depending on what the students are working on, based upon their individual goals. If it's an articulation goal and they're working on a particular sound, the clinician may have the student, take a mask down, see what they're doing with their articulators, and then pull the mask back up, or they might have their mask down and the student's mask is up where they're modeling. But whenever there's a student or a clinician that's not wearing a mask, they do put in other mitigation strategies. They may increase the distance. They may use one of those tabletop dividers to keep, some barrier between them. A face shield, or we have those clear masks that sometimes the clinicians use as well, so that their articulators can be seen by the student. But those are determined on an individual basis for those students.
Thank you. Thanks. Of course.
So can you, that's actually really helpful. And I guess one of the things that I think we hope to accomplish from this is like getting a little bit more clarity for people as to like what the lay of the land is. So how is that somewhat flexibility, or like, because it's going to come down to each individual student, right? It's going to be the specific case, the teacher, the environment, what the what the specific lesson is going to be. Like, how do we communicate some of that flexibility while still trying to like stick to the general kind of rubric of the guidance?
I think that the communication would be with the clinician and the parents, having that, dialogue back and forth, letting the parents know that, hey, for this part of a session, it may be 10 minutes out of the 20-minute session on, working on producing the TH sound, I'm going to ask your son or daughter to remove the mask. So I think that's the best way to on that individual basis, because it's not something that we're going to say all speech sessions are going to be without a mask. That doesn't make sense, nor does it follow, the guidelines. But on an individual basis, making that decision and communicating with parents about that.
Mm-hmm. Now, regarding the masks, just as another example for what it's worth, in the Adapt, Advance, Achieve document, which again, sort of their guidelines, there are things they sometimes put out, say schools may do certain things, right? You may do this, may do that. And we can talk about a couple of those things, as we go through. In this document, one of the things schools could do, if they so chose, was if teachers were more than 6 feet away from their students and speaking from the front of the room, they could remove their mask while they were doing that. Now, after lots of conversation with our local health folks, with Vivian, with others, we didn't do that. And we didn't do it in part based on our understanding and our experiences from the last year, which was if the adult in the room is positive, it was much more likely to spread throughout the classroom than if it was a child who was positive in the room. We saw that multiple times. We also didn't because we recognized that if we have teachers who aren't wearing their masks and we're asking students to wear their mask, that doesn't sit right for me. So teachers know that if there's something that they need to lower their mask in order to deliver the instruction effectively, they know that. I mean, nobody's running around looking all day long to make sure. But at the same time, that was one of those things that we decided just sort of organizationally, it was in lots of conversation, that it really didn't send the right message, and it would be, it just wouldn't be the right thing to do. So that was our decision from the beginning. As we get through this wave, we can reopen, that kind of conversation if need, with the union and others to talk it through. But just an example. Right. Yeah, Hugh.
So when we saw the video of all the kids in the class eating lunch, obviously they can't have a mask on while they're eating lunch. And they're all around the same table, talking, laughing for, I'm not sure how long lunch is, maybe half an hour, 40 minutes. I used to do the lunch room. It was fun. I miss doing it. But it's odd that they go back to their classrooms and then they have to put the masks back on. Is there any flexibility? I mean, I guess, is there specific language that says, and this might sound kind of ridiculous, but that they can take their masks off to eat, right? Is it that specific in the EO? And the reason I ask that is there flexibility potentially for us to allow the kids to take their mask off when they're at their desk, sitting, not socializing, not necessarily doing any group work, similar to the way that the teacher might be if she was fully vaccinated or he was fully vaccinated at the front of the room. Again, I looked through this. I didn't see any really specific language that delineated whether or not, it was in the hallways, and it kind of just says blanket, like always when you're in the school building, but the reality is like they're eating lunch, and for a good period of time, there's germs spreading all over the place. So.
And that's a good example of sort of we get the guidance and we implement on the ground. So it's a great example of that, because there are certainly lots of school systems that have approached the lunch question, which is sort of one of the big ones out there because of, obviously, you're not wearing a mask and eating at the same time. So how do we navigate that? Lots of school districts did it by bringing desks into their cafeterias, putting them in rows, and having the students sit alone at a desk to eat. And we're not doing that, right? That was where locally we said that's the restrictive nature of that. We can do better. So what we've done, that's what we look at the ventilation systems, the other mitigation strategies that we have. We are asking our students, wash your hands before you get in there, use the sanitizer, do that. And we do ask them to keep their mask on while they're getting their food. They take it off while they're sitting at the table. So the idea of a close contact is both proximity and duration, right? So it's within 6 feet for 15 minutes or longer has been the guideline that we've used. So, we look at sort of the proximity and the duration and, try to kind of do it in a way that works best for our kids. It's not the best. I know the best would be, everyone back in the cafeteria and all of that, certainly. But we're trying to walk that line between. In the fall, we were full capacity in the cafeteria. And it's really just since we returned that we've had to spread out a little bit more, and do that. And I recognize certainly that for some kids it's made a difference for them, and lunch isn't as enjoyable as it was. And for that, I do feel badly, which is why we are looking to transition back as quickly as we can from that. But the question about sort of can they do it sitting at their desks, we've been talking about that and asking about that really for over a year. And the DPH feedback continues to be, again, that layering of mitigation strategies, and that they can have them off for that period of time in the CAF. But if a student does test positive, we are expected to kind of contact trace around that for those kids in the CAF. Whereas if they're wearing the masks in the classroom and there's positive, the expectation around contact tracing is no more as long as the student stays symptom-free. So there's a give and take with how these things all work together. But again, I'll go through it, but again, how these things sort of do work together. We saw some examples of students kind of in groups, right? They had their masks on, but they were still in groups. And the guidance from the State Department of Ed says keep them 3 feet or more apart as much as you can. But we are confident in the ventilation systems that we put in place with the fans and the things that Dan and Scott were showing us, things that we're comfortable having the kids working together, and we know how important that is. Now, it may not be to the same degree that it was and would be without masks and all that, but it is still happening because we understand that first and foremost we've got to be able to use the most effective teaching strategies, learning strategies, and that's cooperative learning, right? We don't learn in isolation. So that's where sort of some things complement others and allow us to implement on the ground. And if the State Department of Ed or the DPH was black and white with everything, then we couldn't do those things, right? And that's where they give us the strategies, and we develop a system around that in order to sort of strike that balance. And that's what we've striven to do from the beginning.
Right. So it sounds like we definitely have some opportunity to be a little bit more liberal, even in the classroom. Or it sounds like we could take that interpretation and make our own decision, right? Because it sounds like it's DPH guidance from the state of Connecticut, but it's not necessarily explicitly written in the mandate, or
the things that are I think the thing that most people are most upset about, the masks is clear. It's black and white, and it does say in there, that during the period of time, during the lunch period in the cafeteria, here's some strategies to use, and it's about spreading students out and using other strategies because there's no way to keep the masks on.
Right.
Right. So that is sort of a carve out in the recognition that, and they do tell us even to try to make sure students keep them on while they're in line getting their food. Like they've been very specific about that feedback, and we've spent quite a bit of time, both with colleagues and with DPH and others, trying to sort of, again, strike that balance there in the cafeteria because of that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So it does lead us to the physical distancing. We were loosening up in the beginning. We had to tighten that back down as we came back a little bit around January. But really, we're looking at sort of going back to the pre-Omicron days soon, as we look at this subsiding. But what does the physical distancing really mean? Again, it's sort of, we've reduced the number of kids sitting at the tables in the cafeterias. We are still, grouping where we can and doing those things. It's, we get into things like walking across the building and how far apart kids are in the hallways, things like that. That's a level of kind of specificity that we're not really taking. We're sort of trying to balance these. And the same again goes with the cohorting. And that is in schools as we build a schedule. I mean, that they are cohorted, right? They're with their class and they're going through. So it sort of naturally happens as you build a schedule. And we made some of those changes in 2021, like I mentioned, like the world language over at SACS and some other things. And we've loosened that back up. We loosened it up a lot in the fall, tightened it up a little now. We're going to loosen it back up. But really the idea around cohorting is about sort of close contact and contact tracing. And as the contact tracing has shifted, which we'll get to in a minute, the cohorting has followed as well. So
Right. I guess just on the physical distancing then.
Yeah, Jim.
It sounds like looking at the, I guess, what was the period? August through December versus kind of where we think. So you talked a little bit about the lunches, right, in January related to the Omicron stuff. I guess, what about things in the classroom, like related to physical distancing? Is that just the 3 feet that we're talking about, or is there other things or other mitigation strategies that have either increased or decreased? This is where it's like I don't actually know it. Just trying to put a little meat on the bone to understand what that really means to, elementary school kids, SACS kids. Is that? Sure. I get it at lunch. I think I understand that can ebb and flow a little bit, but a little bit more of what it means kind of in the classroom setting.
Sure. So, and I want to compliment and commend Vivian, Rana, the faculty and others, because unlike many, many districts, we didn't go into the classroom with tape measures and yardsticks, and we didn't have this happen where people were measuring out 6 feet, and in the beginning, desks had to be 6 feet apart, and the way it all worked, and that we didn't go down that road, and we didn't in part because, again, I'm harping on ventilation, I know, but because of what we did with the ventilation, that was such an effective strategy that I think people were confident when we said, look, you're going to be okay. We'll be okay at 3 feet. We'll be okay as we're doing this. What we did do was remove furniture out of the rooms. So we took out some bookcases. We took out old tables and desks and things that weren't really being used. Some people are asking for them back. I don't know if they're going to use them, and we'll see. But it really kind of served a good purpose in a way, because over time things accumulate in the rooms and may or may not actually be useful. So we did do that. We have some trailers that we've kept some of the stuff in, some of the bookcases and stuff. But that opened up the room a bit and gave us some more space. But we never, because of sort of, the layering of the strategies that we have, we didn't get caught in that trap of measuring things out and doing that. That a lot of districts did. What does it mean elsewise as we look at it? I mean, we could talk about how frequently kids are coming together at the elementaries on the rugs to read. We did bring back in some of those, but some things we've learned too that may just kind of be best practice going forward. Like the kids have little squares that they bring and they put on the ground and they sit on their little square as they're doing their reading. That might be better, just for the long term. As someone who likes to read in the classrooms every year, it just may be a better approach. I'm going to leave that to the experts and the educators and get their feedback and see, so go from there. So I don't know if I'm answering your question or not, but I think that we didn't go to a place where it was, everything's being measured out at 6 feet, which thank goodness, and that again is thanks to, I think, Vivian and Rana's leadership and the whole system working together. Yeah, Julie.
Go ahead.
Thanks. Dr. Lutze, when you're talking about physical distancing and you mentioned that we're trying to get back to pre-Omicron, can we start talking about getting back to pre-COVID? I feel like if we focus in on these variables, we're never going to make true progress.
I'd don't know, when specifically around physical distancing, I don't know that we're speaking about different things.
Just in general, but you did just mention pre-Omicron for physical distancing.
Sure.
And as these variants come and go, I feel like we need to be focused on getting back to pre-COVID, not pre-variants.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Well, something that I don't think will ever go away is the hand washing and, Bob, one of your favorites, respiratory etiquette. We had some conversation about that last time, as you recall. The cleaning and maintaining of the facilities, the additional sort of cleaning protocols that are in place. Dr. Keating, I don't know if you want to mention at all sort of our custodians and sort of how their daily routine has changed just a little bit. Sorry to put you on the spot.
If I heard you correctly, it's kind of hard with the muffling, but our custodians continue to follow the protocols that we put in place last year. We do thorough cleanings of the buildings on the high-touch areas twice a day while the kids are in session, and the bathrooms as well. The cafeteria tables are cleaned down after each wave, and it's much easier this year without all the plexiglass, I will say that. We're continuing to use all of the products that were approved by the health department last year, and so we continue to follow those protocols.
Thank you. Okay. I mentioned before that sort of contact tracing was changed a bit. And this comes in part from a memo from the Department of Public Health and Department of Ed over the holiday break. It came on actually New Year's Eve. And the shift was that as long as districts are following the mitigation strategies, with fidelity, that they close contacts within the classroom setting. Students didn't need to quarantine unless they became symptomatic in one way or another. Right? So that's for in school. Because of the strategies that we have, including the masks and others, they're still expecting that folks for close contacts out of school do. So whether it's on a sports team or otherwise, but that's school's not involved there. For us, we still are notifying where individuals where we can, but it really shifted things because, and you're probably very well aware, our nursing staff really did yeoman's work. Sort of when there was a positive case, tracking everything down and making the phone calls and talking to folks and working through all of that. I will share, thanks to our nursing staff and thanks to our faculty, unlike many districts, we didn't close in order to contact trace. We did it throughout the course of the morning. We did as quickly as we could, and our nurses were so good at it. That was one of the ways we were able to stay open. Anyway, that's shifted, and we're no longer, doing the quarantining as we had in the past, where if you looked at the chart in our course and the table in the past, you would have seen some positives and a lot more quarantines. Now it's kind of flipped a little bit as we're working through it. And I think that's a good thing because, again, it's about minimizing the disruption in every way that we can. Same goes with the isolation and quarantine. Again, the difference is isolation if it's positive, quarantine if it's close contact. The DPH still says if your people are vaccinated, regardless, they don't need to. But I think, again, to the question of kind of what's shifted and are we taking advantage of that, in the very beginning, the quarantine period was 14 days. And we all probably remember that, maybe some of us firsthand. Then there was an option through the CDC and then the DPH to go to 10 days, and we quickly jumped at the chance to go to that option. Then the option came out over the holiday break through the memo to go to 5 days for isolation. And again, we quickly jumped at the chance to do that. So we have been sort of moving as quickly as we've been able to around some of those decisions. And again, I'll share that not everybody did. There are still some districts in the state that are using 14-day isolation quarantine periods. So, we've been sort of, when those opportunities have come, we have moved in that direction with the, again, feedback and guidance from our nursing staff, Janet Reed, our director, Harrison Pierce, Dr. Reed, other folks that have been sort of helping to inform us along these ways. But those are, and there was some trepidation to doing that, to be fair. We said, let's do it and give it a shot, and we did, and it's working. So, we continue doing that.
So I think everyone would probably agree 5 days is much better than 14, so that's definitely been a positive move. This is a situation where, is the DPH or in conjunction with the Department of Ed, it actually, you get it kind of, at the end of last year, okay, they're trying to improve it, they're trying to deal with, not having as many people out and change. I think we're probably in a drastically different spot at the end of January with just understanding and seeing how it kind of ripped through, as well as between vaccinated and unvaccinated. Is there any discussion as far as starting to either even further reduce the quarantine, eliminate the distinction between vaccinated and unvaccinated? Because it doesn't seem, based on what the entire state and the entire region has gone through in the last 30 days, that kind of bifurcation makes as much sense. And I'm not saying we control that, but is that being discussed and percolated at the levels to where we might see a further change in this?
So a lot of what the DPH does flows from the CDC, right? So they do, the 5 days came from the CDC first, the DPH took it, analyzed it, talked to the SDE, and then made that change. So I think that's where they would look for any change that might shift there. I think more likely, sooner, might be a shift in that definition of what fully vaccinated is, where in Connecticut right now still we're with the completing the series of the 2 shots or the one at the J&J, where the CDC with the 5 days and others are talking more, they're saying boosted, right? So the DPH here in Connecticut might be considering making that change to their guidance to what it means to be fully vaccinated. But they've also heard feedback from schools and others that that could be difficult to draw that distinction, because then we're talking about sort of when did they get the booster shot, and when does that expire, and how do you manage it? So there's a whole layer of sort of management around that I think they're being sensitive to at this point, which is why they haven't changed that definition, because they recognize that operationally it could be a challenge. But I think that's probably the conversation now, given that this change was just made back in, a month ago, right, at the turn of the year.
Is that one of the 11 mandates that Lamont is trying to get codified into law? I guess I'm just trying to figure out. The masks is obviously one of them, but the quarantining, the isolation, the vaccinate, all that stuff.
So those dimensions come from the DPH and the SDE under the authority of the governor, asking them to create rules that govern schools. And so, that one is they're looking at continuing sort of the rules to govern schools, that authority to the DPH. Yep.
So that's legally binding as well, similar to the EO? I'm just trying to understand where our flexibility is as a locality, as a district.
The 5 days, and then so there's a question there also about, or there's a judgment call for the individual who is isolating because it's a positive case, that if the symptoms are resolving themselves, right, after 5 days and you're fever-free for 24 hours without assistance, then you could look at returning. If not, then, so there is some personal judgment there around, am I well enough to return or not? I know it's challenging when you have asymptomatic cases, right? When you have somebody who's completely asymptomatic and you're telling them that they're going to be out for the 5 days they have to wait. At least in my conversations with them, my understanding of that is really around transmissibility, and they find that in those first 5 days is the highest likelihood of it being transmitted asymptomatically or not. The other thing is it's not 5 days necessarily from the test, but 5 days from the onset of symptoms. So if somebody goes 2 days with symptoms, takes a rapid test, and is positive, they're already two days in. And then it would be 3 days from there, as long as it's resolving itself.
Yeah, I guess I'm just trying to understand the difference between a mandate and then DPH guidance versus Board of Ed guidance. And again, really trying to understand where we actually have flexibility as a district. And that would, I don't know.
Sure.
That's where my confusion tends to lie in trying to figure out.
So when they're coming from, as they flow sort of from the CDC to the DPH, and SDE down to us, and they're giving us sort of numbers of days, and when they're that specific, I think we have to be too. That's part of sort of those guidelines for operating schools. Again, where our discretion comes in from time to time is working closely with our nurses and others to sort of identify if we do have to quarantine folks, who are they, and is that really necessary? And for instance, like even in the beginning, there's been some things where a positive case in a class, and whereas last year we may have put the entire class out on quarantine, instead we're able to really reduce that significantly. And now with this newest guidance, we don't even have to go there because of the how it's changed as of the new year. But those are the conversations that sort of where the entry point is, sort of on an individual sort of case by case basis, as we have the room for the judgment calls. What we couldn't do is say we're not going to do this. But as we apply it and we look at sort of what the questions and answers are in order to make those determinations, working with the health officials and others, that's where we try to balance everything.
Thank you. And there's a 90-day period if somebody is unvaccinated but have had COVID, right, where they don't have to quarantine.
That's right.
Which may actually end up being rather applicable from January to April for
many
the
people.
state. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, that's a good point. Mm-hmm. And that same 90 days applies for folks who might be employees of ours. If they're not vaccinated and they've recovered from COVID, then the testing requirement, they have that period of time as well. Mm-hmm. That's right. Again, this isn't meant to be linear at all, so always welcome to jump back and everything else. But just to mention briefly, and Joanne mentioned the plexiglass, the physical barriers. Again, this is sort of what we've learned as we've moved from last year into this school year. And there was some concern about this when we did it, but we were confident it was the right thing given what we were learning, what we knew. Last year we had plexiglass barriers at various points throughout the school. At some of the clover tables, we saw kids, the kindergarten kids sitting at the clover tables, others. We had plexiglass dividers that we had put in. And fortunately, when we did that, we purchased the plexiglass and then actually manufactured them here. And downstairs, you saw the wood shop downstairs? It became a plexiglass shop with Scott and Dan, and they actually did that. So saved a lot of money, because at the end of the day, we learned it really wasn't having an impact, because you're better off allowing the air to flow and doing the air exchanges than you are putting a barrier up that can, would cause it not to move through and be exchanged the way that it's supposed to be when you're, talking about plexiglass. So we had removed all of the plexiglass this year as we returned in. Based on, again, feedback from the DPH. And that was one of those questions we asked them at the morning meetings very directly about, what's better, the ventilation or the plexiglass, and they pretty unequivocally said that, enhanced ventilation. And if you can do that, get rid of the plexiglass. So we're going to have a fire sale on plexiglass. But that's been removed, and that's gone for good, unless something changes, which we don't anticipate. Travel guidance, sort of, I mentioned the CDC before, and we don't need to go into detail about that. I would just say, folks are traveling, and I know we all do, just to look at the CDC guidance, and it really, again, talks about they still have vaccinated or not, but it's really focused on if you feel symptomatic or the individual feels symptomatic or not, goes through. The diagnostic testing. As you'll know, we've held large-scale events, but now we don't really have to, because the town has been doing a really wonderful job with that since last year, where they've had 2, sometimes 3 opportunities per week for folks to go and to get a PCR test and to get the results quickly right afterwards. But we have an ample supply of rapid test kits that are available at all 5 of our schools for anybody who wants them. They just have to ask. We can go through the nurse, you can go through the principal, you can go through a teacher, and we can get them to anybody who needs them. They are the rapid antigen tests, so they are more accurate if somebody is symptomatic or they think they are. So that's sort of how they're designed. But it's the 15-minute tests, and we have them. We received our supply a couple of weeks ago. We did do a test distribution, as you know, and our administrators were there and, on a Sunday, and we handed out about 1,200 kits, which felt good, but we still have quite a few more. So if anybody wants them, we have them, and it's just there to be helpful. Again, the town does the PCR testing. which is really better for asymptomatic testing. You know, if you need to take a test for, you know, prior to traveling or something else. But again, we have ours, and that's a nice change in this year versus last, where we were scrambling to figure out how to do testing. And I will share. So again, the state has a testing program that you can sign up for, where they come and they test weekly to do screening testing, and they test students, they test staff. In the beginning, it was only for unvaccinated folks. They've just opened it up to everyone. We just don't, as we talk about it and think about it and sort of understand where we are, don't feel that that's something that we need, because we have the tests available, we have the strategies in place, you know, we have a great track record. And so we didn't bring them in, we didn't start the year with that, and I just don't think that that's something that we need to do because of sort of where we are and you know, how far we've moved along. The guidance around remote instruction changed as well over the holiday break. What actually changed was the state asked the rest of the districts to do kind of what we had been doing since the beginning of the year, which was to allow students who are missing school because of COVID to be able to participate remotely. And again, I just can't say it enough, but it's really thanks to our teachers, thanks to them working together and and it was a conversation that I had with Vivian and Rana and a few others and Darlene and all of us, and we talked over the summer about how it just didn't seem to make sense to have learned as much as we have learned, to have done everything that we've done, and to not use the system if kids need us to use it to keep them connected if they have to be home due to COVID. So we did that in the beginning. Since the beginning, it's worked as well, I think, as, you know, there's always glitches, but we're figuring them out, and we work through it. But the shift at the state level was they asked every district to do that for students who missed due to COVID. We had been doing it, so we were okay there. The state still does not permit the full-time remote, so families and individuals to opt for remote, unless there are like certain specific mitigating strategies, and or circumstances, and that has to do with, you know, the student being immunocompromised or someone in the student's family being immunocompromised, and, you know, we've applied that case by case as need be. The other thing the state changed from last year was the option for districts to be remote or to be hybrid. Right? As you know, as we started last year, we were hybrid. We brought everybody back in September, October for the, you know, starting with the elementary, starting with our kindergarten, first grade, and worked our way up, and then with the high school, kind of worked our way down. Tried to, you know, so bring everybody back. But we don't have that option. So if we do have a remote learning day, it doesn't count as one of the 180 days required from the state. Right, is how that works. And the same goes with snow days. We're not authorized to do a remote learning day as a snow day this year. We may be next year, but we're not this year. And part of that was because the state wanted to create remote learning standards. So they've just drafted those standards and put them out. I was talking to somebody who was on the committee doing that, and he said they did a fair job. So we'll bring those forward when the time comes.
So just a couple questions on the remote learning. Oh, sorry, Phil, did you want to go? I guess, how did this work in January when obviously both teachers, we had a lot of teachers out, we had a lot of students out. Were we able to effectively get people online? Was that doable? Like, what was the volume? And I was able to print out from the charting our course, it looks like the numbers, at least, you know, students positive cases as of today, students quarantining, teacher positive cases, like all down a lot. And I guess I'd like to understand how it worked in January, just so we understand how that all worked. And as things appear to be getting a little bit better, what's the dynamic here? And I guess additionally, I would love to hear a little bit about the teacher experience trying to navigate this with one or two students out, and how do they feel about it as far as it relates to, you know, trying to dual track things, because it's great that we have a construct for getting all the students, but, you know, I do think that in stressful times, even more burdens on the teachers, we should at least understand and try and like think through all of that as it relates to like how do we operationally make this work for teachers and students in the best way possible.
Well, it's a great point because especially when we first came back from the break, the number of student absences, as you'll recall from that chart, was extremely high, right? It was over 10% of our student body. We must assume it had something at least to do with, with testing, with being positive. I'll say one of the shifts that we made, which wasn't easy, actually made it even more difficult because initially we had said 24 hours notice. But then we recognized that, with everyone coming back, and if it's a 5-day quarantine, if they only have 2 days out, and so we asked teachers to really try to do their best to get online as quickly as they could, and they really did. So we learned a lot, but it is incredibly challenging especially if you don't already have someone who's remote, right? Because it's not just flipping the switch and getting them into the class on the computer, but it's getting them in the materials and the structure and having them work through. Now, one of the things we did last year was implement learning management systems K-12, right? So we used Seesaw at the youngest grades, and we used Google Classroom, and then we used Schoology at the high school. The staff who had continued using that, who had still sort of kept that up to date, were probably a little more flexible in their ability to shift to online because they had that digital platform there. But it was a challenge for everybody. It absolutely was. And I just again can't thank them enough for just giving their best. And that's what we asked, and we asked the community, everyone, to just try to help us out because we're just going to do our best. And I promise you, it's not going to be perfect, and it wasn't, but it was certainly an awful lot better than having hundreds of kids home with nothing to do. Right, as we did this. So really we were sort of weighing, and we wanted to make sure that kids that didn't feel well could stay home. Because we're in a community where kids and families, they don't want to miss school. They want to be there, and they don't want to fall behind, especially when you get into some of the high school classes and others. But it's hard to fall behind, and kids want to be there. So if we wanted to make sure the system would work, so that if someone wasn't feeling well in the morning, they would be able to take that day or two and either get tested or just make sure they were doing all right. So we are trending away from that. The numbers are coming down, and it's helping. I don't know that it'll be back to what it was in the beginning of the year, and for a couple more weeks, to be fair. But we're moving in the right direction, and that's the key, with that piece. And I think it was hard. It was a lot, and I think it is good to acknowledge that because our teachers, we're starting. And we did meet. Darlene and I met with the union, met with the teachers, met with their executive committee, everything else to sort of process this through. But they knew why it was important and did their best.
I was just going to say, how many kids are in full-time remote learning right now? Do we have any idea?
Not many. It's a handful.
Okay.
When we go back, certainly compared to last year, it's a whole different game, a whole different number. It's less than one per grade, I think, if we look across the district. I can get an updated number, though, to be sure. But I know where it was. But it was because, again, it's really rare circumstance, right, for someone to be in a place where, with everything else that's in place and the masks and all, that it's still the best option for them to be full-time remote.
Yeah, and I would also just add, and you probably heard this from some of your conversations with some of the teachers, but I heard from individual teachers that situation was essentially untenable for them. It was next to impossible, and that was like the doomsday. So it was just get them back in no matter what it took, but just don't make me operate these two systems that were so difficult to manage.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, understood, and it is. It is. We learned a lot. Last year we really did learn quite a bit, but it's not just, again, the high school is one thing because they're in the screen. The kids are more independent. They're there. They can catch up and email back and forth and all, but trying to get our youngest students, not just online, but the materials and the focus and walking through it, it is a challenge. But again, we still felt that challenge is better than the alternative, as we tried to.
So I know you guys have done a lot with managing that and the teachers. All I would say is I think it's important, and if there's especially if we're dealing with other situations where it's becoming more prevalent, more of an issue, if there's additional resources or if there's additional things that the board should discuss to help teachers take some stuff off their plates, whether it's materials or things like that. Like, I'm sure the technology, I know we have the whole technology group that I'm sure are all over it, but that's the type of thing where if there's things that we can do to, you know, help make things easier while never going to make it perfect or easy, we should, like, I think that would have a lot of support.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, a good for instance, and I'm not saying this is what we need, but a good for instance is last year we had a kindergarten teacher who only taught the remote kindergarten students, right? So they were together, they were in that class, and so that teacher built up those skills in order to do that, and the relationship with the families and the kids. They had chosen to be remote, because back, again, last year it was an option for families. You could choose into it. So that was helpful. So yeah, we'll keep our mind on that and make sure. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Okay. Just, going through a little bit more. The weekly schedule, as you know, our calendar remains unchanged, although it's changed a little bit because of snow days. I did update the calendar on the website so folks can see, sort of where we are with that. But the half-day Wednesdays that we had last year, which were incredibly beneficial in lots of ways. So we will be bringing forward a calendar for 23-24 in the next couple of weeks, next meeting. And we may be talking a little bit about maybe putting in a couple of professional learning days. It's not a COVID discussion, we'll get there, and it was here. We talked about the cafeterias and about lunch. I mean, the goal right now is to return to full capacity in our cafeterias after the winter break. We think that those 2 weeks gives us enough time to kind of let the rest of this sort itself out, get our staff back and everything else and be able to do that. So that has been our timing to go back to full capacity in the cafeterias. The recess, again, going back, if you go back to last year, we were wiping everything down, we were limiting what kids could use, we were controlling the balls they had and all of that. We're not doing that anymore. As far as I know, I don't believe that we are. So we continue just letting kids go outside and play basketball or do what they're going to do.
I have a question on recess. Are the grade level classes mixing? Can they mix on the playground?
Do they typically? I don't think that they typically.
I can't remember.
Dr.
I'm sorry, can you repeat your question? Are the classes able to, how are the recess? Are they mixing with other, like, can the friends get together and meet at the,
with
the
different
swings?
grade levels or different classrooms?
No, classrooms, not grade levels.
Okay.
Yeah, so the
I thought you meant
kindergarten
grade
class
levels.
goes out to recess together. They mix on the playground together. They play with kids from different classes on the playground. And that's always been our typical practice, and that's all the way right up through grade 8.
Yeah, okay.
Sorry, I thought you said different grades. I just didn't.
No, that's probably not a good idea.
No. Transportation. The mask requirement on the school buses is required through the CDC. It even goes on to say that regardless of state or school policy, local policy, masks are required on public transportation, and they grouped school buses into that. We've gotten a couple of emails that were helpful and informative about how cold the buses can be with those windows down. So we're talking with Roy, talking with DATCO, our provider, and on those cold mornings we'll make some changes. We're looking at closing the windows where we can. We still need some airflow, but we don't need every window down, so we can take a look at that. I mean, it's been, 4 degrees when I drove in this morning. My windows weren't down.
Just anecdotally this morning when the kids got on the bus, there was 1 or 2 windows that were thinly opened, but it was very cold, so it was probably a healthy balance.
Yeah, that's what we want, a healthy balance. And so again, that was something that I had been on my radar as we looked at it, so it was helpful to hear about it so we can make some adjustments there.
Yeah, I'll just echo that this feels like the lowest of low-hanging fruit. I mean, if the kids can be in a classroom and doing all this cohorting and whatever else, I mean, certainly a bus trip for 50 minutes is not some extra cause for concern.
Right. Yep. Now in the spring, they're going to want the windows open. So we'll definitely balance that out. Go into again, volunteering in the schools. And as we had communicated before, we had started to do that in December, had to pull back a little bit, and now we're going to get back on going through and doing that. To share in one of those Tuesday morning meetings, one of the questions that I'd asked was about volunteers in the schools and asking the DPH and SDE very directly about sort of where what their guidelines are and their feedback is around volunteers in the school. A, good or bad, good idea, bad idea, and B, vaccination status and any questions around that. Now, their feedback from both the SDE and the DPH was that for the duration of the executive order being in place that mandates either testing or vaccination for our staff, that it was right and appropriate to ask folks coming into the building to be vaccinated. When that expires, then could be more comfortable and could, if the district so chose, to not require after that and to allow that to loosen up. So that was both from the SDE and the DPH. The SDE is the legal team, the DPH epidemiologist, which is why we that's how we framed it, to be that. So it was if we're asking our faculty and staff to be vaccinated and to test, then other adults coming to the building to set that same expectation. But when that sunsets, then we'd be more comfortable. Now, again, the vaccination rates in our community are very high. And I think that, I hope that this is something that doesn't impede anyone who wants to come into the school from being able to do so. That's certainly not our goal with this. It's really just about being consistent with what those expectations are. And again, that's why I had asked the DPH and the SDE for their feedback on this directly, just as a check, sort of what is their thinking and what was their feedback. So that's why that was the approach.
Can you, I guess, on the follow, it would be very helpful to share that. I don't know what format that came in.
Verbally.
Okay.
Sorry.
There you go.
I was on that call.
Yeah, Katrina was on the same call with me, right? That was one of those Tuesday morning calls. I apologize.
Because what I would say is having, 13G is pretty clear that it would not apply to parent volunteers.
Right.
Just if you go through and you read covered person and you read vendor and you read employee and you go through and, it's very detailed. Mm-hmm. And it's one of the things that I think I was a little excited about in that, a little return to normalcy. It was nice, you showed the video today, which was, I think, good for people to see, but I think we have a very dedicated community, people that want to be in the schools, volunteering, frankly, helping the teachers, helping the kids, anything we can do to bring back that positive sense of community, I think goes a long way. So if they wanted to send you something, that would be great. If it's verbal, I get it, because it's not the way it's drafted. And I know it's not a huge time period either, so I'm sensitive to that. And I forget when we're back from February break exactly, but I just think it would be anything we can do on that front, I think is important. And and I think you can tell by my comments even on some of the quarantine policies and stuff, anything that we can do to move away from treating vaccinated and unvaccinated people differently, I think is healthy for the community and frankly probably supported by the science. Now, they might not get there for 2 or 4 weeks, but I think that seems to be where it's headed. And I would just like to be as forward-leaning as we can on that stuff.
Okay, thank you.
Julie.
I think having parent volunteers back in the school is going to diffuse a lot of this, and I think the sooner the better. I know it's immediate, but I also want to make sure that all the schools are in lockstep with each other. Just regarding, I think a lot of the issues have arisen from not being in lockstep with each other. Different rules for different rooms and different schools, just room for interpretation. And I think something like reading to your kid on their birthday. I want to make sure that each school is in lockstep and has the exact same parameters and rules.
Okay. Well, we mentioned before, some schools do some things differently, right? So for instance, at South, they have parents that come in to help on Fridays sometimes to put folders together. I don't think that happens at East or West and things like that. So the activities may be a little different here and there, but what I hear you saying is the sort of protocols around this, the COVID stuff, whatever, being consistent across.
Yeah, and also the milestone reasons for parents to be in the buildings, because I know I've missed out on it. I think a lot of people have just mystery readers and again birthdays, and I just want to make sure that all kids get that experience to see their parent reading to them on their birthday, and not just at West, and not just at East, just across the board.
Thank you. Okay, just thank you. Continuing down briefly. We're starting to reschedule night events at the schools, doing that in person. We're looking at doing that out in March, again, for the same reasons that we've been talking about all of these things. Again, question of masks being required or not will be settled elsewhere. So whatever protocols are in place, we'll have to keep those in force as necessary. But we want people to come to our schools. Like, this is who we are. This is what we do. And we want to make that happen. So in the same way, we're talking to the PTCs, the PFAs. For the last couple of years, those meetings have all been virtual. And while I think there's some benefit to a virtual option for those meetings, because it's opened up participation for a lot of folks who weren't otherwise able to come. So we're talking to them about, can we put some kind of a hybrid option for people so that they can still come from work or whatever and be a part, because that's a way to expand the attendance and the participation there. So we're working with them, but having parents come back into the building again for those meetings is powerful, something that we're going to do. And I'll spare you from my story of my first PFA meeting ever as the high school principal those years ago, but I'll tell you sometime. And then the last, and again, thanks to Vivian, Rana, and the teachers, and in recognition of sort of all that we've been talking about, we want to open our buildings up to folks. So we're figuring out how we can run sort of an open house experience for parents in the spring. And we've never done that before. Our open houses in the fall, and we had our fall open houses, but they were virtual. And what we want to do is we want to bring people into the building, definitely in our elementary schools, where folks, if you have a kindergarten or first grader, we want you to be able to sit in your kid's desk, to be in the classroom, to look around, see the walls, see the other people that are there, and, sort of have that kind of positive and I think powerful experience. And, that's the challenge. One of the challenges is when you have open houses this late in the year, people want it to become a conference about their kid, right? An individual conference. And we can't do that. That's not what this is about. This is a community thing, right? This is about sort of getting folks together, coming in, spending some time together, seeing the classroom, sitting at the desk, seeing what's happening, learning a little bit about whatever, and then, it's taking some planning, and Vivian and Rana have really helped me to frame the thinking around this, and they're going to continue to do that because it is, but we feel it's very important for our families, for our teachers, for our schools to bring back that sense of community and give folks that opportunity. I remember when my kids were in elementary school, middle school, high school, I was the dad that went to every conference, and sitting in the desk and looking through and seeing what's there. It's a whole different experience, and we want to recapture that.
Yeah. High school too, or no?
Well, high school is a little different. What they're doing at the high school is the 9th grade orientation, right? So our staff and everyone's coming out for that orientation for the 8th graders going into 9th. So I don't know that we'll do it in high school. I've got to talk to Bill more, but we're looking at probably at least kindergarten through probably 7th, because then those 8th graders are going to be looking at that orientation. And we might do 8th grade too over at Saks. I've got to talk to Dave a little bit more about it. But high school just feels a little different, so we're just figuring that part out.
I just want to put an exclamation point on the spring open houses, because I think, and thanks to the teachers, because I think this is so important and just going to go a long way with just bringing the community together, parents to meet their kids' friends, and you hear about people that they talk about, and just to meet them, meet the parents. I think it's just, it's a very positive step forward, and so, no matter what happens with the mandates and everything, I think this is something that our community can really look forward to, and it's going to be a very energetic day or night, no matter what, so I think it's great. Thank you.
Let's see. So I did include in front of you, just as reference, is the...
Sorry, can I ask?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I didn't realize we're going on about the spring open houses. Being that this is a conversation for not tonight, but I just want to throw it out there. Would we ever consider doing spring conferences? I feel like since there has been talk of learning loss, some kids struggling, some kids aren't, there's both ends of the spectrum, maybe an opt-in or opt-out for parents to have an in-person spring teacher conference, parent-teacher conference. I think that would be appreciated.
Dr. Parental.
So in order for us to do a spring conference, we would have to move into half days in order to accommodate all the kids in the classroom. However, when we do issue the March report cards, I know that the elementary teachers are always available to have conversations with parents, and certainly to have those parents in to do those one-on-one conferences with them. So they are always available to have conversations with parents that have questions. Hopefully the teachers are in contact with parents all along, talking about their progress of their child, especially if they have any concerns of them not meeting benchmarks or not meeting where they should be. So it has been a practice of the past to always open their doors, especially in March when those report cards go out. Many of the teachers are spending time before and after school and even during their prep time to have conversations with teachers about the progress of their child. So I would imagine that would continue. If we decide that you do want to move into parent-teacher conferences, then we would have to talk about half days.
I just want to make sure teachers aren't using time on their own. I don't want them to be using time before or after. They do a lot of work for us, and we appreciate them. And I think it's something we can maybe talk about. I wouldn't want them to use their off time to have 19 conferences. Just a thought.
Okay, just, sorry, what you have in front is the, and again, just reference, and I can certainly, there are websites with lots and lots and lots of documentation. I didn't want to print it all out, and I don't, I'm happy to sort of point you there or to whatever's most helpful for the board, but the Adapt, Advance, Achieve document was sort of that foundational document as we began the year. There have been a few kind of updates and addenda, like I mentioned, that came out on New Year's Eve around the contact tracing and quarantining and other pieces like that. But it's still the framework that we use when we talk about a lot of these decisions that we have to make. And then I thought it might be helpful, again, just to see the what was called the leadership letter, I think it was, from Governor Nedlam, from the governor to the legislators to talk about continuing the emergency. And if you really flip to the back, it gives some rationale that I thought you might be interested in, but it gives you a chart of the executive orders that are on the table and whether or not the request is to continue them. So this is where it breaks into, now you can see the state, school, and child care employee vaccination. Goes to say the governor's not requesting that this order continues as it pertains to state employees, teachers, and child care workers, and then others that he is. So just a source document on that conversation as well. Okay.
I would just comment on the Lamont letter, and I think it was one of the speakers made the comment about, some of this is tied to funding. It's a little scary if you look at this second to last paragraph and the declarations of emergency that they're basically just saying out loud that there's $20 million of FEMA cost and $32.6 million that would be incentivized for keeping the emergency declaration going. And so I know there's a whole bunch of other things, science and the like related, but that is, that's it's shocking.
Where is that? Page 6. Are those referring to any of the educational ones?
It's just, I don't know if it's for the educational ones, but it's
Speaker Ritter was
worth noting that several of these funding sources are contingent on the continuation of the emergency declaration.
Right.
The House Speaker just last week was quoted in the paper. Matt Ritter was literally quoted saying, it would be absurd for us to end the emergency order and give up $50 million. Literally, it's in the Hartford Current. So I do wonder about all of that also.
Hi.
Julie.
Sorry, I want to read something from Stanford Hospital this morning. Here's some good information from Stanford Hospital. I asked the president of Stanford Hospital about the number of kids in the hospital due to COVID. While she did not differentiate between in hospital due to COVID versus with, she did confirm that they have more kids in hospital for flu and respiratory issues than for COVID. It is my understanding that there are currently 0 children in Stanford Hospital under 18 due to COVID. Piggybacking off of Dan, this just doesn't sound like an emergency anymore. And if there's any type of funding involved, I'm fully against it. And Dr. Letts, you mentioned that you were on a Connecticut COVID board, and I plead with you to keep those numbers in mind. If there's not one child under the age of 18 in Stanford Hospital right now due to COVID, I don't know why funding is being discussed. Thank you.
I think that's a perfect segue into, the Thursday night conversation with our legislators. I think, that's information that's important for them to understand. If those are the views of the community, and, so that information can be shared at the state level from New Canaan. So, Brendan. Yeah. Okay. All right.
That's all I've laid out here, but glad to, if there's anything else that. Okay.
So one last comment. Thank you for this. This was very helpful, Dr. Lutzy. I think just showing where we were, where you are now, showing the thoughtfulness that went through, making sure that we're following the rules as I'm trying to understand what are rules versus guidance versus mandates, and I still can't wrap my head around it totally. So I appreciate this. It's been very helpful. I'm going to spend a little more time on it. And the only comment that I would make is, you guys showed exemplary leadership and innovation at the very beginning of the pandemic when nobody knew what was going on. The administration, the staff, the teachers, you all took risks that nobody else in our state and many other states were willing to take. And I think that that's why the community rallied behind the board before me, behind you guys, behind the teachers. And I think the frustration, at least that I'm hearing over the last few nights, is that we've maybe aren't leading the way that we did before. And to the extent that you have, and you're an extremely well-respected individual, in not just our community, but in the state, and you seem to have a lot of these conversations with these folks. So to the extent that you have any ability to, I guess, empower us as a community more, that would be my request. Because we've done it before, we'll continue to do it again. We have the ability to do it, and we have the leadership to do it. So thank you, and would appreciate that continuation.
Sorry, me again.
Julie.
First, I've been thinking about this all week, and I just want to commend the students who stood up there and spoke, whether it's August, who has cystic fibrosis, or Eva, who's not in the audience anymore, or Yanni. I don't think he was here tonight, but he was here last week, and there were a few others. It takes bravery and courage to stand up there to strangers. And no matter what side of the argument they are on, I have deep respect for them. Not done. With regards to local control, I know we're going to talk about a letter on Friday, but I want to remind all of us sitting at this table that we were either elected or hired to make difficult decisions. New Canaan knows New Canaan better than Hartford, and I hope everybody can keep an open mind going into Friday when we discuss the letter. I think that there's nothing more important than local control. And to the teachers, we respect you. You guys have a hard job. And we need to open the lines of communication, and we need to get parents back in the building, and we need to just return to normal. I think there's a lot of fatigue after 2 years, and I don't want it to be misconstrued as not respecting teachers. I tell my son's teacher as often as I can how much we love her and how much he loves her. And I just want to make that point clear.
So I think I agree with Hugo. This was very helpful to go through today, so thank you for putting it together. Thank you for kind of methodically walking through it. Like, I think imparting what you know kind of innately to us and what your team does is helpful. I think the one thing to ask would be, especially while we're navigating this period with a lot going on, let's just figure out the best way to over-communicate, whether it's from the board, from the administration, with parents and students, with faculty, because I think the more that we can kind of get good, clear information out, and if we're making changes, pump that out. Like people will feel, everyone will feel better the more they know, right? Not the little NBC thing, I guess, but but no, the reality is, like, if we can over communicate, I think it goes a long way. People feel less surprised. If issues come up, they feel more comfortable being like, oh, I thought this is what it was, or okay, this has changed. I just think if we all make a big effort to do that and do it frequently, I think it'll go a long way for people.
Well, and just as a very, very brief update, I know it was just a week ago we talked about, because you just reminded me looking at the COVID update, the teacher absences and fill rates and all of that. So like that will be a part of the regular COVID update when we talk at the next board meeting. I looked briefly, I didn't see a significant change this last week, so let's think good thoughts as we go through this week, and hopefully we see those absences moving in the right direction for our staff and Phil.
Is it public?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, that'll be on the, we'll put it on the website.
Great.
Yeah, can I just say one thing? This is great, by the way. Thank you for walking through it. I appreciate it. And I just wanted to, like, I was trying to summarize a little bit, but it might be good to just hit bullets. But what I read was cafeterias kind of go back to normal. Visitors after this is all after the 2/28 break. Visitors back in, or visitors can come in regardless of vaccination status. Events go back online, PTC, PFA meetings happen, and spring open houses. I think, is that like the highlights?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's all good stuff. To your point, I think, getting it out there in a, easy to read format is a great idea, and, that way people kind of know what's happening when we get back.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for that discussion. Comments from the public. Is there anyone wishing to address the board? Yep. You can sort of queue up the way we did earlier. Again, Alessia Miller. Dr. Lutzi, I'd be happy to email you the photo I took of a school bus this morning with the temperatures registering at nearly 9 degrees Fahrenheit with the windows halfway open, just so you can have the most up-to-date examples. But you previously discussed the executive order expiring on February 13th, particularly 13A, which relates to the universal mask mandate. As you explained, it authorizes the Department of Education, Commissioner of Education, to create binding guidance regarding mask wearing. And you said Governor Lamont authorizes this through the Commissioner of Childhood Education. However, you have the ability to speak on our behalf by voicing our concerns to the legislators who will ultimately be the ones tasked with voting on whether to extend Governor Lamont's executive orders or whether or not to make the 11 EOs into law in the alternative, as Hugo was mentioning. Our legislators are elected officials much like yourselves, and their constituents, made up of the people in this room, are the ones to whom they are elected to represent and to whom they are accountable. You talked about the guidance received from the state on mitigation strategies, and that they don't tell you how to do it, but each district has the ability to operationalize what they say. As you've done so, it's been on a continuum. Well, now it's clear that we've entered the endemic phase of this virus. You have the ability to further operationalize the state guidance by removing some of the unnecessary requirements, in addition to advocating on our behalf with our representatives for local control and choice. You, particularly Dr. Lutzi, having a unique position on both the Board of Education and the Connecticut COVID Board, I just knew now, are the way in which we can put pressure on the legislators to send a message to the Governor, Lamont, that we will, as parents, will not remain silent anymore, and that we want a choice to remove these masks off of our children's faces. Sending a letter is a good start, but it is the tip of the iceberg. Instead of exhausting our time on revisiting existing or expired strategies,
Deploy your efforts where they are most useful by putting pressure on Hartford. We will advocate for our children with every breath in our bodies and expect you to do the same. Thank you.
Hi, it's loud. I'm Laura Holden, and I am a new mom almost twice over in the pandemic. And I just wanted to first thank you for all the time that you all spend kind of developing and supporting this school system, which is the reason that my family is here in New Canaan. I'll just say, though, that the video that you put together about the state of our children in the New Canaan schools was just very objectively depressing and disturbing. And the kindergartners wearing coats and hats during their lunch inside is just not acceptable. And I'd also say that this is really ironic that we're all gathered here tonight about education, because I simply believe that the science and the math just doesn't support these mitigation strategies anymore. And I think that children have truly been left behind in this pandemic for what seems to be $53 million in funding for the state. Candidly, I thought the presentation on the ventilation system felt like a filibuster, and we lost a lot of people in the audience. We didn't really start discussing protocols until 8:30, which was an hour and a half after we gathered. Dr. Alexi, you said teachers are not wearing a mask and children having to wear their mask didn't sit right with you. If that was kind of the case, if teachers were at the front of a classroom not having to wear a mask and the children had to wear a mask, it didn't sit right with you or wouldn't sit right with you. And that's exactly what is happening. But it's not teachers, it's the rest of the town. The rest of the town, you go into Zoombox, people aren't wearing masks. You go to Greens on the Go, you go to other restaurants in town. Children are the only ones that are like literally living this bizarre, kind of by this bizarre standard. And we do need to work our way back to something that resembles something more equitable for children, for the children of this town. I'd also say that, Ms. Parkhill, I find it really disturbing that you just said no matter what happens with the mandates. Like, I think it's very clear that the mandates are not helping our children and they're very destructive. So I'd just close by saying we're a week out from our meeting last Monday, and I really, truly don't believe that much progress has been made, and I find it disappointing. But I do thank you for your time tonight.
Hi, good evening. My name is Dr. Elaine Morganelli, and I have 2 children in the New Canaan Public Schools, one at the high school and one at the middle school. I thank everybody for your time. I think this has not been an easy course for any of us, and there's been a lot of hard work. As sitting back there as a physician, I have to say, it's been frustrating. The first thing, it's so sad to see people divided to a point where they are so frustrated, which should make everybody sitting up there understand that something is not right with what we are doing. As a physician, I have prescribed more anti-anxiety and antidepressant medication in the last 2 years than I have in all my years of practice. And I don't think we realize what these rules are doing to our children. Now, I thank you so much for bringing up some of the stuff you said. It's hard not to sit here and think that a lot of this is politically generated, and that's not what I'm getting into. But scientifically, as a doctor, when you look at all of these rules, they do not make sense. Now, you're following guidelines from the DPH, and I have to say, I have seriously considered quitting medicine during this pandemic because as a physician, these rules do not make sense. And by seeing our kids sitting close together in a cafeteria eating lunch, which I'm so happy they do because they should, but then go back to the classroom and have to put on a mask, does not make sense. We as physicians, if I go into a room to see a patient with an airborne illness, I have to be practically in a spacesuit with an N95 mask, not with one of these. These do not work. All they do is give us a false sense of security. that we're safe. And all that's doing is scaring our kids even more, that they can't go places without these. These don't work, because if they did, I would go in the room and talk to the patients with one of these. Half of them, if they're not tight over our face, they're not going to work. And I feel like you have to let our kids be kids. Let them live life. Their education has been so affected over the last 2 years. As much as we want to say, yes, they're doing
2
well.
minutes, sorry.
But please, fight for us, because politics are involved here. And when you go up to Hartford, it's going to be very different. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Victor Alvarez. I have a son who's a sophomore at New Canaan High School. And I wanted to say that, Dr. Lutze, you have been speaking on our behalf and doing it extremely well, given the complexity that COVID has brought to our school system. And so I just want to say I am confident that you and the board will lead us through to the end of COVID with the best outcome for our students.
Thank you. Okay.
All right, I just wanted to finish what I was saying earlier, which was regarding some of the most world-renowned epidemiologists. They've discussed this at great length. Nothing can replicate natural immunity, complete and durable immunity. My son, sitting right over there, didn't want to go to wrestling tonight, wanted to hang out. He beat COVID in 3 days. He has complete and durable immunity. This is specific based on pathogen specific. So according to Dr. Harvey Reich, MD, PhD, Yale School of Public Health and Yale School of Medicine, professor of epidemiology, he stressed the importance of natural immunity. He said that's how we get out of this. He talked about the ineffectiveness of masks. He said we have to acquire the natural immunity. Some places very early on throughout the country had upwards of 80% natural immunity, and we weren't acknowledging that. Some people hit the nail on the head. It's gotten beyond political. It's disgusting. Funding involved. Keep them in masks so we can get more of that. We're going to deal with that on Thursday. So we understand the science behind this. We understand the specific viral genome. We know what works. Again, Dr. Lutze, I commended you for that email. I don't want you to back down from that. When you said cure many who are experiencing severe illnesses, I mean, that's optimism based in science. You would not have said that unless you could back that up. So again, that's appreciated. But we can't go all over the map and say, well, we need these effective mitigation strategies. We have members of the board who don't even acknowledge this by saying we don't even know much about this virus at this point. We do know a lot about this, quite a bit about this specific pathogen, what we can do to mitigate it. Natural immunity, working together, partnership with vaccines for those who require specific vaccination. Whether or not it's good for their immune system, they have to consult that with their physicians. They have to make those personal health choices based on their immune system. I can't tell that for them. They have to do that. Can't say, oh, you're not vaxxed. I would never teach my kids they can't stand next to somebody who's either vaxxed or not vaxxed. That's not how we're, as human beings, that's not how we carried on for millennia. We do it by getting through this on herd immunity, vaccination, viable medical treatment options. All of those have to work together. It can't just be one size fits all kind of a concept. So again, Ms. Parkhill, I'm asking for a public vote on this when it comes. We want to know which Board of Ed members support science, rooted in making mask wearing completely optional.
2 minutes.
And we want to know which Board of Ed members support draconian policies to continue kids' masks. We want to know that as the public and as voters. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jacqueline Mayer. I spoke twice last week. I've emailed the board. I think my communication numbers are at something like 8 or 9 times now in the last 6 weeks. I don't know how much more verbal I could have been talking about my daughter who's been doing speech therapy in a mask for the last 2 years, and tonight was the first time I've heard anyone mention that speech therapy can be done without a mask on or have some sort of measures put in place. I think I cannot believe that I heard that tonight. I feel like I just wasted 2 years with a child who was identified before her 3rd birthday as needing speech and physical therapy. We had this window of opportunity. That's why we moved to New Canaan. Here she was, my first child. I thought she was perfect. I burst into tears at her first PPT when they told me she needed special education. I mean, I was in shock, but everyone kept telling me New Canaan public schools are the best. She is in the best hands. That was December 2019. She has been doing speech therapy in a mask for the last 2 years, and now tonight, I hear that there was a potential to do something else. I cannot express how disappointed I am. I have emailed. I have gotten up here and spoken. Where was that communication? We failed her. We failed her.
Okay, thank you. Announcements and future business. I think we've probably hit on most of these, but there's our special meeting on Friday, letter, healthy school start and end times, and then our next meeting.
Next regular meeting is on Monday the 7th, and we will have a science and STEM update.
Excellent. Look forward to it.
We will do that. Among some other things.
We don't have the time Friday yet, correct?
We don't. We have not.
Yeah.
Exactly. It'll be a special meeting similar to this, so we'll have to.
But we're thinking
probably
late
in the
afternoon.
Late afternoon.
Okay.
We'll confirm hopefully tomorrow.
We have reserved the space.
Okay.
Yep.
I just think it's obviously 2 topics I think people are going to want to opine on. So I think that if we can let them know and make sure that gets pumped out the best way possible, that'd be helpful.
Great. Great. And of course, you mentioned February 3rd.
Yes. Say it again. That's February 3rd. All of the schools should have this information. You should be seeing it by email tomorrow, but I see Tom O'Day in the audience. But thank you again to our 4 local legislators for providing our community this opportunity to share much of the feedback we heard tonight. I would say it's very important for them to hear as well in terms of how we move forward as a state and as a school district. So I would encourage anyone who has interest to attend on February 3rd, which is Thursday at 7 o'clock at Saks Auditorium. So. All right, that motion to adjourn. Hugo, second. Phil, all in favor. All right, good night. Thank you.
Thank you.